Our story begins with this handsome blonde man informing our protagonist that he could die tomorrow due to a dream he had. But Hyun didn't understand what he was talking about. He had finished off thousands of calamities before, many more than the two chosen ones combined. How could he imagine that he would die? Next, in the Montor Demon Tower, this was the place where the worst calamity that annihilated all of humanity lived. All this began on the last day of the 20th century. The calamities appeared out of nowhere one day and cornered humans with overwhelming power. Just when humans were sunk in chaos and horror, 12 gods appeared who called themselves divine gods. They promised humans they would give them the power to overcome the calamities and selected 12 awakened ones to save and control the world. But something unexpected happened. A 13th awakened one appeared, with the difference that this person had not received any blessing from any god. And to the anger of the 12 awakened ones, he was overwhelmingly stronger than them. They were in the castle, and Jin defeated all the calamities that appeared. They were amazed, and Hugo thanks him, as thanks to him they were able to conquer the demon tower. Jin only wanted them to thank him with fried chicken. The other saints talk about whether eliminating Garmessi will probably yield incredible rewards, since this is the worst calamity of all. At least they will receive 100 billion. Jin expresses that everyone should settle for a good life and give the money to the other countries since they are on the verge of bankruptcy due to Lojo Garmessi. The office worker blackmails them. He needs to get a lot of money to be able to make deals with them. Only they can fix the face he used to have and heal that badly injured body. They also warn him not to run off to kill calamities just because someone asks for help, since they need a certain number of accident-caused victims to receive more reward money. Jin thinks that they call themselves saints, but in reality, they were just thugs who only cared about themselves. He will cut any ties with them when he defeats the Crimson Eyes. Later, in the boss room of the Crimson Demon Tower, 10 chosen ones were scared to the point where they only wanted to flee that place. The pressure exerted by that demon was beyond what they had felt before. Due to the power that Calamity possessed, everyone ran away, moving away from that scenario that led straight to death. Everyone except our protagonist, who rushed in without a shred of fear. But everything had been planned so that Hyun would fall into the trap, stabbing him in the chest with a dagger and falling into the void of the demon tower. And where he was, he wondered how much time had passed, what the outside world must be like now. He must keep cutting no matter what, as that place was a special trap that summoned infinite calamities. But that wouldn't be enough to kill him. They should just wait. He will definitely survive that. He will rip off the damned heads of those bastards. As time passed, exactly 20 years later, he reached the last remaining demon, who was scared to death because it was impossible for him to reach that place, begging for mercy. But Hyun, by the way, look at that Viking god, does not hesitate to kill him, reaching the end of his journey. And the tower begins to collapse. He finally thinks he can get out and passes out. Then the scene changes. Outside, everything was destroyed, and 2 people were running for their lives. High-ranking calamities were chasing them. They had taken the wrong path and, due to bad luck, encountered them. The wolves managed to catch up to them. The 2 were already resigned to their death. When an explosion is heard in the distance, they didn't understand what was happening. It's our protagonist, who is cursing everyone out. How dare they stab him in the back and push him into a trap? They were damned bastards. He will kill them all. And in a rage, he defeats wolf after wolf. They think those wolves were orange calamities that even high-ranking awakened ones would struggle with. But he crushed them like insects, and they are surprised because that guy came from that tower. But the other one doesn't believe it's possible. Nobody could get out of that tower alive. Hyun jumped toward them. Almost crying, they beg him not to harm them, and the wolf boss appears behind them. They both think they are dead. They couldn't survive an attack from the boss. But Jin steps in front of its attack, protecting them, insulting the wolf, calling it just a pup, defeating it with a single attack, and he asked the guys to, "Could you go buy me some food and some clothes too?" Later, at a restaurant, Jin had eaten $10,000 worth of food, and he had held back because they told him they didn't have money. They ask him if he was a disciple, what he was doing in the tower. Hyun replies that he just got out of that tower, and there are no further explanations, and he is not a member of any god. Why would I serve such despicable beings? And upon seeing his reflection in the spoon, he is surprised. He demands a mirror immediately. And indeed, his wounds had recovered and his left arm regenerated. The mark on his palm catches his attention, and a strong pain appears. And messages start to manifest. You have experienced death, now you can use the power of Afiyuko. He enters a state of ecstasy. In front of his eyes was a giant snake with eyes emanating power and confidence. Hyun wakes up asking if they also saw a giant snake, but no one had seen it. And looking at his palm of abilities, he realizes that his physical change was thanks to the new super regeneration ability. He has heard something similar about the other saints, but he cannot feel the presence of any god. But well, regardless of that, what he had to do now is kill the saints who fled and massacre the one who stabbed him in the back. At the scene of the demon tower's destruction, journalists and officials are figuring out who could have done that. Even the saints would have trouble with those beasts, and they begin to stipulate that possibly Li Jian might have returned. At a conference was the ram saint, Jiang Wei. All the reporters ask what he thought about the possible news that Jian had survived after 20 years. But all he expressed was that he had no comment on the matter. Later in his car, he was extremely angry, as he had only heard Hyun's name all day. Again and again. What they were saying was impossible. He couldn't survive 20 years in that tower, as there were tens of thousands of evil beings. And if that wasn't enough, they were all black rank. His body was already shattered from the recoil of his powers. He hadn't even received a blessing to help him, but if, hypothetically, he had survived, it would all end for them. In another scenario, Mr. Hugo Otters gets off the plane, creating great admiration from the people present for being the divine Sagittarius, a true chosen one. On the way to a super important conference, his cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. He thinks it was those damn journalists, creating more conspiracy theories about Hyun, who they always say is alive. But 20 years had already passed. He doesn't understand how this could be. Remembering what happened, he had been outside the tower at Jin's request, defeating the calamities. He prayed for his prophecy to be wrong and for Jin to return safely. But only the divine beings survived. They abandoned Jin and returned with the head of the red eye. Their achievements were recognized, proclaiming the 12 divine beings, including him, as heroes, allowing them to gain money and authority. He couldn't believe Jin had died and requested searches multiple times, but Malin, the cancer divine being, convinced everyone that it couldn't be done, as the number of calamities in that tower was too great. No one could enter, but if Hugo wanted to go, he could go alone, but none of the 12 constellations would help him. He concludes that no matter how strong Jin was, leaving that tower was impossible, and a call from the Prime Minister comes through, who tells him that he did find out that the demon tower has fallen. But Hugo is not willing to believe any conspiracy since Jian was dead. There was no other answer. But the Prime Minister just received information from Korea that Li Jian's exclusive direct call line was busy a few moments ago. And Hugo, excited, asks them to stop the car because the calls he received recently were from Jian. He calls him back, and what he hears is "I will find you and kill you." He shouts for them to turn back to the airport, that the negotiations in England didn't matter. He wants to go back. As for Jin, he was getting informed about what was happening on Earth at that time. He sees news that his name was trending, and the comments were a bit contradictory. Many called him useless, that the 12 constellations had saved him. He did nothing, it angers him, but he calms down and remembers donating all his properties and possessions to the orphanage if he died. He wonders if that was well kept, but sees that all his belongings were distributed to the 12 constellations. And he gets upset again, breaking his cell phone and proclaiming that now he will really kill them all. The guy cries for his cell phone since he still hadn't paid for it. Hyun plans to announce his return, but it wouldn't be convenient since his physical appearance had changed from 20 years ago. If he goes expressing that he is Jin, everyone will call him crazy. So first he will take care of taking revenge on each of the constellations, and he receives a message. Someone is watching you. So he decides to get some fresh air and realizes what was watching him was a domestic god. Domestic gods are divine entities controlled by the blessed gods. Those domestic gods were subordinates of Ares. Jin gets angry. Those things were asking him for a tribute, and this stupid couple appears, who are talking about the trending topic. The people were very stupid, as they were paying attention to a loser who disappeared 20 years ago. The buddies warn Jin to flee, as they were from the Gemini group, who were dangerous. The guy tells him to go to hell, blowing cigarette smoke in his face. Asking why he was angry, the woman thinks they better leave, as that guy could piss himself from fear. He agrees, as losers like them liked guys like Jin. Obviously, they took refuge in a person who was clearly weaker than all the saints. What did they call Jin? Jin shouts at them, cockroaches. They turn back and corner him. To repeat what he said, how could such a weak person? And Jin, before finishing the sentence, gives him a small blow which sends him flying and leaves him unconscious. The woman, upon seeing what happened, tries to use a racing gun on him, but the protagonist had already seen it coming, and he will give her another blow with his finger. I know this blow is tinkank, I don't know about you. The buddies complain that he couldn't use his abilities in the middle of the street, much less against Ranka disciples. But he had only defended himself, and if he hadn't done anything, he could have died. He knew something was wrong when he hit them. This artifact seemed divine, but it wasn't possible, since only saints could possess them. And here is the explanation. Hyun didn't know it, but when humanity was almost extinct by the calamities, the divine gods chose 12 chosen saints. But since the world cannot be protected by only 12 people, the saints gathered people to follow them, and they formed a divine squad. And the people who have awakened upon receiving the power of the saints are called disciples, which are classified into ranks. For example, there is the SSS rank, which are the chosen saints who are leaders of their divine squad. The SSS ranks, which are the 10 stars that can be considered candidates for saints. The S rank, which is the strongest disciple who commands the disciples in battles. The A ranks, which are the strongest disciples in their squads. The B and C ranks, which are the remaining disciples. And the power of the divine gods comes from the faith of the disciples. I don't know if the word disciples bothers you, but I don't know, it gives me something, disciples. So the saints hold all kinds of contests to get people who want to join. And the selected disciples receive gifts from the divine gods, and it has been like this for 20 years. And Hyun turns around, and the domestic gods had observed what happened. They incited him to finish off the man and the woman. They wished to see bloodshed, and they would give him a useful gift if he killed both. These beings were like the shadow of the divine gods. Opposing them was the same as opposing the gods. They ask him to hurry up and do what they want, but Hyun didn't agree with that. He wondered why Yang Wei's thugs were in a place like that, but it was obvious. They were trying to fill their stomachs. He thinks Yang Wei was still the same bastard as always, taking a step, which caused a rumble that made the sheep clouds disappear. Looking at the unconscious man, he thinks that if he was an important person, everything he was wearing was branded. So he steals everything. After a few hours, they are outside the buddy's apartment, who thanks him for saving his life and taking him home today, but Jin asks him if he's not going in, saying he's sleepy. He also takes the opportunity to cut his hair, and he is a handsome friend. In the past, every strand of hair was cherished by him, since he kept losing hair as a side effect of his abilities. He notices a small calamity in the house. That was very strange, since it usually meant something was attracting them. And that was because he had all those evil artifacts. It was an object he received directly from Gemini. They were his most prized relics. And the protagonist slices it, claiming that mask was a divine artifact that controlled whoever used it. The music box was for stealing personal information. The watch was for summoning calamities. He is filled with rage, thinking that the saints not only stole his money, but are also selling and giving away evil artifacts to feed their magic and wealth. Suddenly, this character appears, who is the owner of that house. The buddy tells him the whole story of how they met him, but he doesn't believe him at all. And to top it off, he broke all the divine artifacts in the house. He asks him which divine squad he was in or which divine god he followed, and upon learning that he followed none, he asks his name. Upon hearing the name Lijin, he flies into a rage, manifesting that he entered his own house, broke all the divine artifacts as if he intended to be Lijin, activating all his power on the protagonist. A caution message appears expressing that if keep going like this, he's going to burn down the whole house. The redhead's statistics were quite strong. He could even use a high-rank invocation at an early age. He asks Jimin to leave if he doesn't want to die. The first time they say his name, friend. Me foolishly calling him buddy all the time. But out of nowhere, Jiyeon appears behind him and gives him a tinkank and stuns him, stating that he could have burned down the entire building. He goes to sleep, and upon entering the room, it was full of figures of him. The redhead challenges him, asking him not to dare enter there. That was the collection he valued more than his life. But Jian was uncomfortable with it, so he removed the heads to be able to stand them. The next day, Hugo only saw news about Hian, and he was definitely alive. They are about to take his order, but he immediately realizes that it was Yang Wei, who had possessed another body to communicate with him. He thinks he must find Hian before anyone else, but he has no clue where he might be. Subsequently, in the Ares Divine Squad, they tell him about the appearance of someone who defeated the domestic gods. They also mention that Hugo's blessed one had cancelled his plans to return, putting the one from the goats, Ares, on alert. Furthermore, they had found an unconscious disciple who was only wearing his underwear. According to witnesses, he argued with a handsome man. Because of that, he calms down a bit because the Legion wasn't him, but there was a possibility that it was him, and if this continued, his position would be threatened. At the Gemini-affiliated hospital is this old man. He is complaining that they could not leave his son in that state, but they calm him down since they had sent him to solve what had happened. Gemini disciple rank S. Permafrost. Then the two friends are at the supermarket. Jimmy asks him if he really thinks it could be Hian, but the danger doesn't deny it. Physically, he is totally different. Besides, Li Hian was a hero who saved humanity, not a thug. And a blizzard appears that shakes both of them. It was a thief who was a Scorpion disciple who could use uncommon speed, which helped him steal all their items and wallets in 5 seconds. And not even an S-class could catch him. But someone hits him, leaving him on the floor. It was Jin. He forgot to tell them to buy some chicken, and the bald guy who isn't bald shows up. Paraphrasing that, it was impressive, since Scorpion disciples were very difficult to catch. Because of his energy, he felt like a normal disciple, so next time he should call the police. And a rumble makes everyone present tremble. The thief thinks that Earthquake was perfect to escape, but at the moment of fleeing, a calamity appears. But he doesn't care, since not even calamities could reach him. However, he is caught by one. The supermarket activates the drill. A calamity is inside. He asks the civilians, who had no blessings, to quickly evacuate the precinct. Due to the appearance of the Red Queen, it has turned into a red zone. When everyone falls into despair, a child is stalked by a calamity, and the protagonist comes to the rescue. He didn't understand why there were calamities in a market, but that didn't matter at that moment. Time has passed, so he will do some warm-up. The scene changes to the King of the Goats. They inform him that a calamity in a supermarket has appeared, the Queen Spider Calamity. He thinks that was the creature they couldn't defeat. He thinks it will be very difficult to face a red-level calamity alone. Here it is explained that there are 6 levels of calamity. Blue grade is the safe god level, green level are safe areas, yellow level are caution areas, orange level are dangerous areas that must be guarded, red level, which are areas governed by calamities, and black level, which is the destruction of humanity. And that spider has appeared. So the supermarket transforms into a red zone. The chief of the goats tells them that the only option they had was to bury the supermarket. No one should know. If they find out that the spider was there because of them, they could suffer losses of believers. In power, they will say that all the people who were there died, and that they will send disciples to the location to bury the entire building. In the precinct, the bald guy who isn't bald was freezing the calamities, feeling proud that this is why he was a rank S. But the calamities easily break the ice. Jin appears and asks him to move, to give way to the professionals, and starts throwing sodas as if they were bullets. And by the way, slicing everyone with his skills. Thanks to that, he has new skills and will be able to create artifacts. The bald guy complains how it was possible. Such a weak person couldn't destroy those calamities. Not even he could do anything. But he realizes that he was the person who had ambushed the disciples of his divine squad. And it was clearly him since he used the same clothes as them and also had the Gemini insignia. He shouts that this was clearly the reason why he was so strong because of the artifact. Divine, but in the scene the queen appears. Jin doesn't hesitate for a second and attacks. Everyone present is stunned. It was crazy. A single person could face a calamity of red level without any divine artifact. The redhead and the bald guy receive a message from the captain via telepathy. They had to leave that building quickly. The Ares guys were going to bury the entire building, and they had no way to stop them. They are desperately trying to hide their mistakes, involving the Queen Spider. The rank S had teleportation skills, so the two could leave without problems. The redhead, seeing the situation, refuses to follow orders. There were too many people in that place. His best friend was also there. The rank S argues that there was no other way out. He could only teleport two people. He has no intention of being buried alive there, telling him not to bother him. He couldn't ignore orders from the captain of the Divine Squad. For that reason, he will get rid of the burdens so they don't worry about them, threatening to kill his friend. And the two get on guard, activating their powers, and a scratch hits the bald guy in the back. The friends tell him what was happening. They had to heal the injured, save the people, and prevent them from being buried. The rank S emerges from the rubble shouting that they were going to die, but he was going to save himself. But the queen spider captures him and eats him. Jin, seeing the scene, asks them to go help the injured. He will take care of the queen spider. It will only take him an instant. From Yang Wei's perspective, his seal was not working for some reason, and a great power emanated over the place. It was a giant snake. People run away, asking for help, reporting that there were injured people inside, and the spider had been killed by a man. Yang Wei is surprised. How could someone do that? Not even him, one of the two chosen ones, could do it. It was impossible. He had to verify for himself what had happened. He can't believe it. The queen's spider, which was a red-level calamity, lay before his feet murdered. He cannot find a logical reason for what happened. He hears the voice of someone familiar, and indeed, it was Hugo's, but it was impossible for him to do something like that. And a soft breeze of fear runs through his body upon hearing the words that, "Hello, Juan Carlos, how is your daddy, daughter?" Jin asks why his expression was so broken, distorted. Since they hadn't seen each other for a long time, outside the supermarket, the redhead gets an idea that he could indeed be Jin, due to his movements. At that moment Hugo arrives, and we are informed that he is the redhead's father. He was very worried, but receives no answers, and Jimin comments that Jin must be fine. That upsets and amazes Hugo. He asks him to tell him in detail what happened, and an explosion is heard inside the supermarket. The goat, Ares representative, had attacked Jin without warning because he felt cornered, but he calms down since he thought it was Legion. But he looks very different and wasn't covered in scars. He expresses to him how he dared not know his place and go against him. He had to prepare for what was going to happen, but the protagonist lunges with a punch to the stomach, and while he was in the air, he takes the opportunity to land another blow. On the ground, he confronts him. They stole his divine artifacts and his belongings, even forged his will, so he is going to kill them all. He will destroy everything they have. Yang Wei says that the way he speaks and acts were very similar, and he failed to see his movements. He believes it could be Hyun, but if it really was Hyun, he would test him by invoking the divine god, the Jade Emperor. Arius using all his abilities, filling him with chains and throwing an enormous amount of swords at him, declaring that he clearly hadn't wasted time during 20 years. He was stronger than before, but the mound of swords Terran, and Jin lands a direct hit. He finally recognized him. He had indeed returned from hell. Thanks to defeating him, new skills awoke that Shiad is ready to use. The god Ares was astonished and trembled, exclaiming that it was impossible. Jin was quite merciful, so he will make him feel what he felt for 20 years. Then Hugo arrives on the scene. Clearly, the only human capable of doing that was Jin. Finding Yang Wei's body, he wonders, what can Jin do now? Meanwhile, the protagonist is in the Ares Divine Objects Museum, but in the premises, there were only fake things. Except for what Jin was looking for. Taking it from its place, all the guards of the place immediately surround him, threatening that if he doesn't return the artifact, they will have to use force. Jin refuses and attacks them all with a simple movement and activating a line. It was this little thing, which was incredibly strong, and a message gave an alert. That door was holding divine artifacts. Hugo, seeing people running, thinks he arrived a bit late and spots him. He runs towards him. He starts talking to the guy behind Jin. Crying, he thinks his scars had healed. He looked a little different, but he was happy that he was alive. And Jin sends him a kick. He says it seems like he should give him a beating, so he would recognize his friend a little. Huguido cries, hugging him. He really was alive. He hits him again and confirms that it was truly Jin, and the Sagittarius god appears. He questions that Jin was alive, so he will see what happens if he shoots an arrow at Jin. But Hugo tries to calm him down. Jin states that when he left the tower, his house was sold, and his will was arranged, and all his relics had disappeared. He was too angry, so he would have to give him a small hit. A crowd is heard in the distance, complaining about the man who stole things, but Jin only stole a few small things. The guards knew he wouldn't be a match for this guy, so they called a monstrosity to counter him. And the Beast of Riches, Pichu, the protagonist, appears on the scene. He knows what he has to do. He asks for his divine sword to show his true power to Lane. That sword had awakened through the power of the serpent. Thanks to that, he can clearly see the beast's weak points. Hugo thinks it was incredible. He always threw himself against his enemies, without fear of anything. He was proud, but the beast crushes him with its dub. Nah, just kidding. Hyun lifts it up without major complications. It was his turn to attack, cutting off the beast's leg. And in his second attack, he unleashes his power, not only defeating the beast, but destroying the entire place with a single attack. Hugo thinks that was the same power he had 20 years ago. A message appears for Jin asking if he wanted to tame that beast. He accepts. And Pichu is now his, and it can also become small, celebrating that it could now store more treasures. Then they are arguing. Jin treats him as a traitor. Hugo thinks he cannot say that since he was very worried about him all those years. But Jin believes that was a blatant lie. He got married, had a happy family, had children, enjoyed life while he was locked in a trap full of demons. He should feel ashamed and regretful. He couldn't even recognize his friend when he saw him. But not to feel too bad. After all, divorce wasn't so bad. Hugo states that he wasn't divorced. He didn't want to talk about his wife. He asks him how the tower incident went. At that moment, he was outside, and when he entered, the others already had the head of the Crimson Eye. He also asks him not to tell his children anything because they are fans of him. Jin begins to narrate his terrible story. They stabbed him in the back and threw him into a trap. That was a place that was plagued with numerous calamities. On top of the numerous calamities that appeared incessantly, the dead Crimson Eye had also come back to life. It turns out the Crimson Eye they saw was not the real one. The true Crimson Eye was deep inside the tower. He managed to defeat it. But the real problem wasn't the Crimson Eye, but the tower administrator, who was a demon capable of reviving dead calamities. After 20 years passed, he somehow managed to get out. At the end of his journey, he managed to kill the administrator. And after exhausting all his strength, he remembers that he died there. But when he woke up, the calamities had disappeared, and he obtained his current abilities. The truth is, it was quite confusing, but he only knows one thing. The bastard who stabbed him knew the structure of the demonic tower. He will punish the constellations, but the one who stabbed him, he will make suffer in the worst way. And for that, he needs to form a necessary team to hit him properly. He creates, thanks to the fragment of the Queen Spider, a rank B pony. It has several qualities, but Hugo thinks it looked quite good, but for a high rank, it didn't seem that great. Jin expresses that he had no idea how many materials he used to make that. In fact, he was also thinking of creating another one for Hugo, but now, based on his comments, he should forget about it. And Hugo starts flattering him, that it was incredible, that he truly was a genius for being able to create divine artifacts. Jin takes out his unique divine artifact, the Golden Fleece safe. He heard Hugo had no money, so he brought it to finance him. Hugo shouts that he wasn't poor. Hyun thinks that the higher the rank, the better artifacts they will create, but they realize that no one there could use it. He curses everything, because he had already sent a declaration of war to the radio. Well, they just had to find another way to face him. The scene changes for us. Korea, Blue House, several heads of the Divine Squads are gathered. Oliver, from the Divine Squad of Leo. He was arguing with Choi, captain of the Divine Squad of Gemini. They are talking about what happened, about the Queen Spider. They throw in each other's faces everything they did wrong. The two are about to fight, but an alert arrives, something big had happened. They received a message on the news which included photos of Yang Wei, and a writing saying, "I am back," from the deceased Lee Hyung. Hugo is challenging him, how could that be? And to top it off, he announced it everywhere. It was clearly a declaration of war, and killing someone was too cruel. But Jin hadn't killed Yang Wei, he had only turned him into this little plushie. His abilities had improved quite a bit from the experience of that battle. Now it was possible for him to keep Yang Wei's soul. He also passes him the dagger with which he was stabbed. It had a special grade. It couldn't belong to Yang Wei, it must belong to someone else. He will stop by the Divine Artifact Shop to find out more information. At the scene of the disaster Jin left, they inform the Saint of Aries, Sophie Marty, that there was a small possibility that Jin was alive. She only believes they are bad jokes, and reports that they will go to the divine artifact shop to sell their artifacts and earn money to buy artifacts at the auction. But another saint had also requested to participate in the auction. He was Stephen Marker, who was obsessed with Hyun's divine artifacts, and he was the saint of Leo. The protagonist, meanwhile, was in the city heading to the divine artifact shop. I said divine artifacts many times, didn't I? I'm sorry. Which had an S-rank appraisal tool appraiser. The redhead had given him the tip, thanks to his boss. The boss wanted to meet the person who defeated the Spider Queen. Jin gives him a Class A dagger for bringing him, and they arrive at the premises. At the same time, people are amazed seeing such a beautiful person. It was the saint of Aquarius, Saint Sophie. She asks to enter, but she couldn't. Someone was inside before her. On the outside, he accepts, but on the inside, she was furious. Inside, the appraiser asks about the item, who made it. And upon learning that the protagonist made it, he thinks he might have some connection to the hero Lee Ji-on. He asks Sun Hae to please wait outside. They had something to discuss in private. Once alone, he paraphrases that not many people knew that Ji-on was a legendary producer. The artifact he brought had countless forgeries, but this one was different. He feels a work of art by Lee Ji-on, and he recognizes him because he was a disciple of the hero. Ji-on gets confused. He doesn't remember having any students, so he thinks of hitting him for this presumption. But he hands him a notebook. Hyun remembers him. He was a rookie who had followed him 20 years ago. He had a marvelous eye for items. He bequeaths this book to him since he was young. He left the path of Lee Hyun in his hands. The book glows, but they are interrupted because the saint was outside. She complains that they couldn't keep her waiting. She was the saint of Aries. She forces her way in, and upon entering, she notices that man. He was very handsome. She needed to get closer, but Laura and the serpent's power make her kneel in fright. She felt like hundreds of snakes had coiled around her and runs desperately out of that place. Jin learns that she was Saint Sophie and bursts out laughing. He hadn't recognized her due to so much plastic surgery. On the outside, she must have changed, but her heart of trash and plagues never will. In an alley, Saint Sophie is having memories of the old Jin. She thinks that power was overwhelming. It resembled his greatly, and she gives the order to return to the pawn shop and simply kill them all. The appraiser deserves it for sidelining her, and the man for bringing back a trauma from the past. She will give him a divine artifact that will grant him the powers of a god. And as expected, she obeyed since there is no way to refuse a request from the 12 celestial beings. Then the redhead is walking calmly through the central district. He notices that the water has a small degree of mana, and bodies of water begin to emerge throughout the sector. The redhead confronts a guard about why they were using an ability in a neutral zone. But she was only following heaven's will, activating a divine object, trapping everyone in water bubbles. She will take care of the appraiser and the man now. In the shop, the appraiser is imprisoned in a water cell, and Jin was under the guard's knife. The saint had told her to kill them, but if they apologized and bought the divine artifacts, they might be forgiven. And Jin takes the knife and breaks it with just his fingers. They had told him not to move, and they attack him with a water dragon. But Jin, with just a jab, dissolves the attack. Seeing Jin's strength, he takes out his best weapon, something made with the mana of the snake. A high-rank invocation, the water wolf. Jin appropriates some daggers and stabs the wolves again and again. The guard was surprised. He had destroyed their best weapons. And seeing Hyun's gaze, she runs away. Instantly, the redhead enters, describing what had happened outside. They had to leave their place because more people might come, people whom he would recognize their movements anywhere. He asks if it was possible. Was he Lee Hyun? He thanks him. He asks him to come back whenever he wants. Then the two are eating ice cream, and this guy arrives. It was the captain of the Choi Divine Squad. He was delighted to meet him. He had heard many wonderful things about him. He was looking for talent. He tells him that one of Hyun's 8 divine artifacts will soon be auctioned, so they could go to discuss a deal he has for him at that location. And only he can take him because that place was a private enclosure. The scene changes to Fortress City, Drachma. The blessed of Aries, the blessed of Leo, and also the blessed of Sagittarius were gathered. Hugo. Sophie goes in search of talking to Hugo, trying to annoy him. He used to be the most handsome man among all the saints. Also, he used to be strong. But everything had changed, as his disciples were very disappointed in him. Hugo ignores her, but she throws a comment. He couldn't do whatever he wanted. If he did it again, he could lose his children, just like how he lost his wife. She wasn't dead, but because of his incompetence, his family was falling apart. Hugo doesn't like her words at all, letting out his abilities, throwing a punch at her. But Sophie blocks him without major issue, making it clear what her position was. He was too weak to raise his voice to her. And just as he is about to attack her, Hyun appears, dissolving her ability and giving her a thump on the forehead. Stunning her, he asks Hugo not to always follow him everywhere, wondering if he liked him, and that girl also followed her everywhere. That maybe she liked him too. And we are shown the saint's memories. She hated Jian, she was afraid of him, his horrible face full of scars, his personality, and his cold eyes. One day, 20 years ago, Jian arrives confronting her about how she could be doing that. He had sent her to the rear guard to treat the wounded, but the people under her command. Most had lost arms and legs trying to protect her. Because of her mistake, they will immediately go treat those people, but she shouts for him to let her go. She didn't care if those people died. No one would care. Moreover, they should be happy to give their lives for the saints, and Jin slaps her. He expresses that she needs a good beating to teach her values. Then she wakes up and screams upon seeing that she was in front of him. They think they underestimated her by tying her up with only ropes, but Jin realizes and hits her for being foolish. She laughs because she had an ability that activates when she is hit. Her body would boil in acid. But as we know, the protagonist has the ability of healing and regeneration, and now it was time to settle accounts. She had sent someone to kill him, so she will face the consequences. By hitting her many times, the abilities improve, and he gains the divine status, which allows him to have disciples for him. He doesn't understand very well, but he leaves the rest to Hugo, because he will go to the auction, and at that same moment, the Saint of Leo arrives. Stephen, who immediately activates his power upon seeing that Sophie was captured. Hugo had no intention of telling what happened. He was only there for the auction, and he shouldn't be there just to get Hyun's weapons, given that they won't make him stronger than him. Upon hearing those words, Stephen thinks he has to know his place. He shouldn't keep talking about Hyun in front of him, since now he was the strongest of all, and a screaming disciple reports that someone was buying all the items. The saint had no time to waste with, and immediately goes to see what was happening. He gives her his last advice. She had to master her personality if she wanted to keep living. In the VIP room, Jin is buying item after item that used to be his. The man with glasses had given him the option to buy whatever he wanted so that he would join his divine squad. He offers him all kinds of conveniences. If he joins Ares, he could be the successor. He would have wealth and honor, all for free. But Jin believes they were asking him to become the lackey of a poor divine god. At that moment, they hand him a divine artifact he had bought. The man with glasses, scared, asks for that relic to be returned since it belonged to Hyun, and one person is obsessed with his objects. They could get hurt if he finds out, and the door breaks. Stephen enters with a tone of conflict over who dared to lay hands on his items. The captain explains the situation and apologizes. They would return his item. In fact, they were going to gift it to him for the trouble, but Jin didn't think the same. He wasn't going to return anything. That belonged to him, but he could sell it to him for 200 billion. Stephen laughs, thinking that in Gemini there were only cowards, but he was different, and for his great bravery, he will give him a gift. Using an attack with the spirit of Leo, clearly that attack could finish off anyone, but the protagonist clearly wasn't just anyone. He believes it's his turn to give her his gift. The saint for the first time in a long time felt fear. But at that moment, a new item was announced for the auction. Stephen gets excited and leaves, since finally he would be as strong as Hyun. The only thing that made them different in the past was that Hyun had a weapon. He was convinced what was in front of his eyes was the strongest artifact, which would proclaim him the strongest. And in the distance, a calamity dragon also plans to get that artifact. That bone was an artifact that Jin had obtained in a high-rank tower. The bids had exorbitant prices. Everyone wanted the legendary weapon. Jin was watching his money increase. It was quite a spectacle, and Stephen's voice shakes the stage. He had offered a billion friend, $1 billion for that item. And since no one bid a higher price, it was sold for $1 billion. When Stephen was finally happy to get the most precious thing in the world to him, everyone starts chanting his name. Then a wall of the venue breaks. It was a calamity, demanding the divine artifact, attacking Stephen, who bats it away, sending it to the other side of the city. Because of that, the magic tower starts to crumble. If those debris fell on the city, it would collapse. Consequently, all the disciples gathered and released manna to prevent the debris from falling. But at that rate, they couldn't destroy them all. And at that moment, the saint of Sagittarius jumps into action. Everyone thanks him, but another calamity appears that could use the bodies of its prey to control them. Hugo charges, but in a lapse of attention, the other calamity appears, but luckily for him, Hyun kicks it and insults Hugo because he was still so weak at fighting. He felt very uncomfortable having such a weak friend. Hugo defends himself thinking he did the best he could, and Stephen enters the scene, complaining about why they were interrupting his experience with his divine artifact. And he uses his real ability against the calamities and the people present. That was his famous lightning storm that couldn't be destroyed. He uses it to test his new weapon. People comment that they were saved. He was the strongest man, even stronger than Jin. And when he hits the calamity, absolutely nothing happens to it. He tries again repeatedly, but nothing happens, and the calamity sends him flying. Meanwhile, Jin was very angry. How dare he trap him in that place? But since he was already there, he would take care of the beast. It had turned people into hostages. He couldn't attack it so easily. But Jin had a plan to forcibly free them. Hugo thinks then that he cannot do it. Hyun believed that from the beginning, he would have to take care of them alone. He had no expectations of him. But Hugo will cover his back anyway. The protagonist enters attacking with his black whips, freeing all those present from mental control. But he became overconfident. The mental control could regenerate. But Hugo was there to reinforce his strategy, and Hyun manages to position himself perfectly for his big hit. Thanks to that, he gains new and better abilities. On the other hand, Stephen was badly injured, wondering why the great bone wasn't working. He was being cornered, and Jin appears to kill the calamity. The beast senses the danger instantly. It will leave the Saint of Leo to focus on that man. But Jin uses his new ability. He releases all his power and creates an instantaneous pressure against his opponent. 7. Stephen, upon seeing this, thinks that only one man was capable of achieving that. The protagonist was delighted to meet the person who had enjoyed messing with people in his name. They attack him with the super bone, but he stops it easily and with just one hand breaks off the top part. And he also lands a punch that makes the city tremble. In fact, he pierces the city with Stephen's body, and since everyone was already safe, he uses Ucha to collect everything worth using. He tells Hugo that he knew someone who had come with him to the auction. His name was Sun Hai. He was young but quite brilliant. Hugo couldn't understand it. He had been careful not to involve his children because they were fans of Hyun. His family could turn into chaos. He immediately asks him to break away from Gemini, since it was a society with only bad intentions. Furthermore, his disciples were too. But a father makes himself heard, saying that if he had expressed himself using the name Lee Jian to that man. But there is still a whip left which attacks him, but Lime eats it. Jian demands that he spit it out. It could be dangerous. He shouldn't be so hungry and eat the first thing Sun Hei finds. Upon seeing what happened, he recognizes Lime, an artifact of the hero Jian, and the power, the previously demonstrated abilities, moreover. The only person with whom his marginalized father acts friendly like KO. He asks if he could really be Lee Hyun, crying with emotion. Then, in the United States, seat of Leo's divine squad, they are discussing the incident of the blow to their saint. They still haven't found him, so they must do something, but she doesn't want to look for him. In fact, she is going back home. She wasn't interested in what was happening, since her brother informed her that there was a cool guy at his house. She was Jaeon Joha, one of the 10 stars of Leo's divine squad. The news only talks about Jaeon and what happened. The Saint Sophie is hiding in her house, since the day before she was going to give a conference. And the collar that Jaeon put on her came to light with a message, which said, "Tell everyone the truth from 20 years ago. I am not dead." She didn't know what to do. They had put her in a very complicated situation. The most sensible thing in that situation would be to give statements about what happened 20 years ago. The news announces that Sophie will give an explanation soon, and an unblocked character thinks that won't be good. In the sanctuary of Sagittarius, Hugo's home, they are practicing archery, and as always, Hyun humiliates Hugo. Yang Wei treats him like a king. That angers Hugo since they don't even bring him a little glass of water. The protagonist researches his sanctuary and divine squad. He realizes he needs members. Also, he had an appointment. He had to meet many people that day. The man with glasses is convincing him to join Gemini's divine squad, offering him all the money available to him. It annoys him, but it was a unique opportunity for him, so after thinking about it a lot, he accepts, but with one condition: that he gives him the badge he wears and lends him the fire forge of his divine squad. And he also needed that badge to be able to use the benefits that come with being part of Gemini's divine squad. And he was the type of person who needed something tangible to be able to trust. So what do you say? He has another appointment, so he must hurry his decision. The guards could not accept the disrespect, and the redhead was super happy because Hyun had given him a dagger. But this guy appears with two friends to steal it. The blonde was a Gemini disciple, Jang Kaiwa, but we will call him Glenn. They were trying to provoke him, but he couldn't do anything because he was the son of the saint of Libra, and they knew it, which is why they behaved that way. He shouts at him to give that back, but the two friends hold him and throw him against the table. The blonde tells him if he was sure that everyone would call him a coward for shouting so much. They knew he was a fan of the hero Jin, which is why he was just as pathetic as him, or maybe he was pathetic because of his sleeping mother. The redhead loses control upon hearing those words, releasing his power and activating an ability that made Hyun appear, who headbutts the blonde. He is surprised to see Sun Hae. He was about to sign the contract to join Gemini, but he appeared there, and since he was there anyway, it meant the guys were threatening his dear nephew. How dare they hurt him? He will show them what happens when they hurt a loved one. As for the friends, they were already stunned on the floor. Glenn repeated to him that he couldn't do that. He was the son of the company president. He repeated it over and over, but Jin was determined to teach him a lesson. Glenn believes he couldn't humiliate him like that, so he activates his paralysis bull ability. The protagonist thinks maybe he had something more interesting, but no, suppressing his ability, and he will teach him how a true power is used. He tells the redhead that when he is in danger, his uncle will cover his back, and Nane appears on the scene, whom Sun Hae happily introduces. He has defeated countless calamities, a hero who saved humanity time and again. The protagonist of the movie they watched over and over when they were little, he was Lee Ji-yeon. Nane couldn't believe it, rubbing her eyes. It could be Lijun, but he was too handsome. 20 years ago, he was covered in scars, but what mattered wasn't his appearance. She was happy that he was safe. He introduces himself and asks for a favor. She knew she was being a bit daring by telling him this, but it was urgent. But just as she is about to give him the message, a calamity appears inside. Nane cuts it in half. She couldn't make her proposal properly if calamities were nearby. The alarm activates again. Calamities had appeared inside the city. Everyone had to evacuate and seek shelter immediately. Nane was desperate. She had to do it even faster. She wanted to finish as quickly as possible to propose to Hyun. He had been watching to make sure she was safe, but they were strong enough. They had even more combat sense than Hugo, but in a lapse of attention, a calamity is about to attack Nane. The calamity exclaims that they were quite strong, normal humans couldn't. Dodge their attacks, he will accept especially as a pet. Hyun thinks this instance was perfect. He needed to create believers so they would have some fun. He asks his nephews to take care of the calamities because he knows they are strong, and now they will have fun together. They manage to reach him and hit him, but Jin is unaffected. He asks if that was all she had, but she replies clearly no. They were saving civilians, but Nane thinks that Uncle Jin was definitely very strong. But his opponent was a fantastic race, the most dangerous among the calamities. She thinks she couldn't lose him again. The calamity thinks it might have hit him too hard, but Jin emerges from the flames, which were quite strong, and he was going to use them as a gas burner for his forge. And now that he has some flames, he can't wait to use his hammer. The calamity doesn't know what he is planning, but it won't let him use it, and Lona appears to stop it, but her attack is useless. The calamity hits her against the building wall with one hand and asks his pet to manage her. But Jin appears. He warns her he will kill her if she touches his niece again. Seeing the direct fear in her eyes, she feels death, which makes him transform into his final evolution. Fantastic Beast, Wings of Hell, Danger Level Red. In honor of his power, he will destroy it with a single attack. She is surprised. He blocked her hell with just a vinyl glove. She will pay the price for setting the city on fire with his smithy's fire for the rest of her life. And Jin hits her with a purification blow repeatedly, but one cannot purify someone who is already dead. The lizard gives up, immediately becoming his slave. Nane approaches, and he remembers her words about her proposal. He gets a little nervous, but Nane has doubts about his story. He couldn't understand that all the saints had survived that day, except him. Even though he was the strongest of all, the only theory that could exist was that they had set a trap for him. Hyun is surprised. It was to be expected from a friend's daughter. She was right. 20 years ago, they betrayed him. He was one of the 12 saints, and it was clearly because he stood out above all of them. He killed Crimson Lojo, the greatest calamity of all. Now they could control the world, but they only had one obstacle. They felt a lot of pity. He was locked up for 20 years, they even took his glory for themselves. Although he was the one who saved humanity. Jin calms them. At that moment, he was already fine, and that was the only thing that mattered. And he will see the last thing on today's agenda. Saint Sophie was giving statements. She was between a rock and a hard place, but she had to tell the truth. If she didn't, Jin would finish her off. And she tells everyone that the real person who killed the Crimson that day was Lee Hyun. Everyone enters a state of doubt, asking multiple questions about what the truth was then. And a sinister shadow appears behind Sophie. It was Jean-Louis Morin. The cancer saint, turning off the microphone, tells Sophie if she had gone crazy. He explains that she must act as always if she didn't want the world to see how he rips her throat out. At that moment, and that she should stay quiet, he turns the microphone on and explains that Saint Sophie at that moment was only talking nonsense. Apologetically, what they had told previously was simply the truth, but the journalists were not happy with the answer, so he is willing to use his power to silence them all. And Jin appears giving a kick. Sophie screams that he was here, and they also give her a free slap. Jin demands explanations from the rotten crab as to why he was stopping her conference. The cancer saint and the others present did not understand and did not know who was in front of their eyes. The protagonist claims that he was the hero Legion. Everyone bursts out laughing, as he didn't resemble him in the slightest and looked quite a bit like him. And Jin will show the crab that he was, and the journalists too. He asks Sophie to spit out the whole truth in front of everyone, but a purple aura invades the building. The cancer saint had released his god and will give a welcome to his old companion. At home, Hugo is happily eating some ramen and sees the news that a man claiming to be Jin is fighting with the cancer saint. Screams if he only learned to dot. For 20 years, Hyun shouts back if he had only learned to make clones in the last 20 years. The cancer saint creates a vortex of power, which took away the sole power of the people present. He had simply decided to use his blessing to finish him off. Jin asked him if he had stabbed him that day. Jean-Louis responds, if the world's hero held a grudge against someone responsible from 20 years ago, people would think he was just a thug, and his ability wasn't simple clones. He has created clones with the life force of the journalists. Therefore, if he eliminates a clone, they could die, attacking him with all the clones. But Jin had swapped his body for the tail and hit the real Jean-Louis. He knows that he was only a part of the real one, but he has a big prize for him. He takes his core out of his body, giving it to the serpent, and everything returns to normal. Jean thinks it was a very good strategy, but he won't claim victory. He still had cards to play. Jin thinks he knew he couldn't stand idly by if they defeated him, and a call from Hugo appears. He screams at him how he could do that. He was watching the news. He had just gotten rid of one of Jean-Louis' high-ranking schizophrenics, unleashing a rain of missiles. We are explained that the Marmot missiles, after the disappearance of Legion, Capricorn, and Genesis, worked together to create a catastrophic class decisive weapon for the calamities that humans could not face, and they became humanity's aces. Well, Jean-Louis made them fire automatically if their life signals were cut off, the protagonist thinks, and he has the perfect plan so there would be no destruction, and he looks at Saint Sophie. The city alarm delivers the message. Everyone must evacuate the area. Missiles would fall during the next few minutes, unleashing chaos among them. But Jian goes with the Aries saint on his shoulder, knowing she could turn anything into liquid. She screams at him how the hell he is going to do that. Hyun expresses to her that if she can't, then everyone will die, so she has to try hard. In the air, the divine god of Aquarius was surprised by the situation. He casts all his buffs so that his chosen saint does not die. Real skill, goddess's tier. He succeeded, and Hyun lets her fall freely. She had done a very good job, but if those fragments touched the ground, chaos would also be unleashed. So he should give a big salute to the witch. He communicates with Hugo and demands that he lend him his ability. Hyun believes that should be enough. He had the power of the Sagittarius saint and the Aries saint. He performs a teleportation spell, sending all the fragments to another location. Everyone was safe, and the fragments were thrown to the location of the Gemini Saint's divine squad. Then in Xiongwaxi, they are discussing that Leo has not appeared, and they have defeated the saint, knocked down Cancer, and blocked the missiles. The protagonist appears breaking the ceiling, expressing what they were whispering about him. They arrive with the captain and Hugo. They were there to recover their money. Although he was sure to leave a will, all of his had been donated to other things they shouldn't have. Most had been donated to the witch. They say it was difficult to oppose the Korean government. Their first option was to give the money to Hugo, but since he wasn't Korean, they couldn't give the money to a foreigner. Furthermore, due to what happened in previous years, he had lost a lot of credibility. Jian hits them because they chose a witch instead of his friend. Who did they think they were to belittle his friend? He knows he was crap, he looked like his slave, but they couldn't treat him like that. Even if he is a penniless and absolutely ruined saint. The more he talks, the angrier he gets. He asks Hugo to be strong, and will ask for all his belongings to be returned. But a shut-up is heard on the scene. It was the voice of Hai's Gemini Saint. She wasn't going to return anything. They were the owners of the bank accounts. Also, there was destruction in her palace. He will have to use that money for repairs because of her fault, and now that she has him in front of her, she will get rid of him by summoning the fairy spirit. This spirit was one of the strongest, but Jin didn't care and grabbed her, throwing her through the air. Seeing the scene, the fairy tries to rip herself away, but Jin grabs her by the head. He tells everyone that clearly that was not the Gemini saint. And well, after having seen all that, clearly they had to return the money or something very similar would happen to them. Leaving the building, they happily go to recover Jin's assets, and they also had an idea where the witch might be. Already at Sunhae's house, they were eating, and the fairy queen was trapped in a safe. She had to answer everything they asked her. That weird witch still hadn't appeared, but he knows she doesn't want to appear. Moreover, it's not that she doesn't want to, but because she can't. He will give her a chance to say exactly where she was. She, seeing the power he was transmitting, points to a figure. Jin knew it. He sensed the stench of that witch on that figure. He uses his third sense, and indeed, Hai's was in that figure. We are told that from minute one she knew Jin had left the tower, knew what had happened, so she decided to investigate, turning into that figure. But since Jin had broken her, she could not return to her original body. He asks his summon to help her, but she didn't want to. He asks Sunhae to help her. It was a celestial order, but he couldn't obey either. But it was his duty. He was the enemy of her divine squad. The redhead, upon hearing these words, makes the decision to stop being the divine squad of Gemini. If he had to face his hero, it was better to stop following her. And upon throwing away his insignia, a roar appears. For the act committed, a divine punishment will be given. The saint asks him to reconsider and apologize. He was the suitor to take her place, and Jin was a despicable man, but he asks him to shut up. They would give up anything for their own convenience, but instead their hero was different. He will always save those in danger, that he shouldn't dare look down on him, exclaiming those words with blood in his eyes, nose and mouth. By the divine power of Gemini, the goddess was going to get rid of the redhead. However, Jin uses Abyss Cut. This causes all the subjects of the divine squad of Gemini to lose their powers. He thanks him for saving him. The saint demands to know what he had done. His power had completely vanished. An explanation is given of what had happened. The divine gods spend a lot of resources entering this reality. That is why they always provide a saint, and that saint distributes the strength among all his disciples. In other words, the god is the power plant. The saint would be like an energy transformer, and the disciples would be the plugs. Therefore, Jin had cut off any connection to the central power source. That was an ability of the crab, and he had stolen it from him. She refuses to believe his explanation. That was impossible. If he did that, the goddess would come to intervene. But that was Jin's plan. And on the scene, the goddess Freyja was gathering power to launch her attack. However, Jin takes out a fragment of Cancer's core. The goddess was surprised. He regretted not having any blessing, because if he had one, he could send them all flying. But he could settle for the scythe of the abyss. Attacking the goddess, the spectators are surprised. He could wound a god. The scythe breaks, and the divine goddess Freyja gathers all her power and summons portals everywhere. But a stop is heard. It was Hugo and the god of Gemini, proclaiming that divine gods could not interfere in this world with their true forms. Clearly, the Sagittarius god was no match for enforcing that justice, but they were not the only ones opposing her interference. And multiple messages from all the gods begin to appear, lending their power for breaking the rules. And several chains surrounded the goddess, inflicting the punishment on her without saying goodbye first, protesting that she would never forget what happened that day. Jin asks her to bring her older brother next time. After what happened, he thanks Hugo, but that was the beginning of what he had planned. He will not rest until he puts an arrow in the head of that goddess's brother. Hugo had also gotten him what he asked for from the palace of Yin and Yang. That building had maximum security, but he used infiltration and Gylo and At. Upon opening the scroll, Hyun manages to register the affiliated spirits. Berserker, legendary type. Giant of the Giant Kings. Jotun, legendary type. And the warrior, Har, legendary type. They were affiliated with Gemini, but they wanted to be part of Hyun, but he didn't trust their loyalty much. So he asks them for a test, and they give him Heise's body, and for that test he will accept them all. Heise protests that this was a nightmare, but Jin yells at her to be silent. Her goddess has completely abandoned her. He asks her if she stabbed him, and after having her hanging for a long time, she says it was Virgo. Well folks, here are the saints on screen, so you don't confuse the constellations. And also to say that if you are enjoying this type of content, subscribe and like the video. Thank you very much, very much. He expresses that he should have told him that sooner, so he shouldn't have endured so much pain. And for the information, he will return her body, but by mistake, he gives her body to the fairy, who was very happy. That also angered Nane. Then at Hugo's house, they are deciphering contracts for his SS rank summons. The Gemini saint was locked up with Jin's other relics, and the new members of his house were very excited. In fact, they were screaming with excitement. Hugo thinks it was the first time he saw such happy summons, but the three ask him not to interfere. He was just the errand boy, but Jin corrects them. They were misinterpreting things. He wasn't an errand boy, but a slave. They astonishingly ask Hugo not to speak then if he was a slave. Jin asks why they preferred him over the divine god of Gemini. They couldn't stand the tyranny of that god, and not only them but the other gods. And their commanders. Currently, due to the unknown civilization feeding the calamities, humanity has lost half the world. At first glance, it might seem that the saints and the calamities are maintaining a tough balancing act. But the reality was very different. They were at the point where they couldn't recover the amount of land already taken by the unknown civilization. Kian thinks about gaining allies. The civilization is beneath the Sea of Geminis, but it is at the bottom of the Pacific. It must be right next to the unknown civilization, so he will have to check the status and devise a plan. The three brothers kneel before him and swear allegiance. They will support him in all his plans. Joan thinks it was impressive. Little by little, he is gathering high-ranking domestic gods. Nane thinks it was great, and for that reason, he did a good job proposing marriage to Lijin. Upon hearing this phrase, Hugo changes personality. What do you mean propose, you son of a bitch? The goat bear expresses that Hugo would then be Lijin's father-in-law, and Hugo sends him an arrow. He expresses that he couldn't even manage. To make his daughter say that they loved him on Father's Day, he couldn't stand it. He uses all his abilities. Jin thinks that guy really didn't know how to be moderate. The way he is acting reminds him of a certain person. His children scream for him to stop all that. He couldn't beat the hero, Jin. He was weaker. Jin says why he gets so angry about what the children are babbling. Does he think he would be the type of friend who would go after his daughter? He almost burned down his whole house from getting angry. It is hard for them to express their feelings towards him, but they loved him very much. They brought him a coffee and a cake. He gets excited, but Young's was for Jin. He had uploaded the fight video, as they told him, and upon seeing his piece of cake, he realizes they gave the cake strawberry to his fiancée. And just then, Nane receives a warning message. A red-level calamity has manifested at the Divine Bridge. All disciples had to respond immediately. In the sea, near the capital of the Philippines, Manila, the forces of the Divine Squad of Leo were already giving a pep talk about how difficult this battle could be. But they shouldn't be afraid. It was a great opportunity to show their bravery even if their saint leader wasn't present. In a shop, this guy felt that those men were simply barbarians. They were just trying to mask their lack of skills with pep talks, but he didn't care about that. He wondered if his gift had reached the right hands. The messenger had arrived at the house. They talk about what had happened in Hugo's shattered place, and the box starts talking about where Jin was. He was forging his new weapons, but they weren't turning out right. The hammer wasn't useful for what he needed. He laments not having the hammer that grants achievements. He had no idea where he could recover his weapons, and it was difficult to get the materials for divine artifacts just to be throwing them away like that. And he hears a familiar voice. The goat statue introduces itself. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. He was Sergevich. Jin says yes and calls him Sebastiano, but his name was Sergevich Vladimir Ivan. Now he is Russian. He was the saint of Capricorn and, like him, specialized in production. After Lijin's disappearance, there were no prominent weapons in the world that hadn't passed through his hands. He wanted to apologize for the past events and wanted to have a new cooperative relationship. And the protagonist slams him against the wall. He assumes that if it was about him, what he would say would surely be trash. Sergevich Vladimir says he was as moody as ever. They ask him to come out. It was time. The news reports that they have come to cover the incursion of the red-level calamity. This calamity that Jin had eradicated 20 years ago, but it had returned. It was a red-rank calamity. Many forces from different divine squads had gathered to fight it. There were the forces of the Divine Squad of Leo, but without Stephen, the specialists in magic, transformation, and masters of war, from the Divine Squad of Pisces, the Iron Wall from the Squad of Taurus, the Battlefield Saints from the Aquarius Squad, and the forces of the Divine Squad of Capricorn. In charge of producing and strengthening weapons, a multitude of divine squads have been deployed for joint strategies. Even the Saint of Capricorn has appeared. Gio didn't understand why that vegetable patch was on the battlefield, and upon seeing that old man holding that hammer, he shouts that object belonged to him. Not only had he stolen his objects, but he was also showing them off. He will have to give him a beating. And on the news, something absolutely massive appeared. From the depths of that vast ocean was the calamity. 1,000 arms, red danger level. All units prepare for battle, and a person was dangling a tentacle. It was none other than the Saint of Leo, Stephen Marker. He was fighting the calamity alone, but they realized the reason for his fight was because he was crazy about that bone. The old man asks if they were ready to start. The captain saw that guy's intentions. He was just trying to steal the reward, but now he was in command. So he yells at everyone to take Peasy's physical strength position. Aquarius gave buffs, and Taurus was in defensive formation to prevent attacks on the rear guard. Leo was ready and prepared to attack thanks to everyone's abilities, and the Divine Squad of Leo gave the signal. All mages must attack. Stephen challenges them. They couldn't attack until he took out his bone, and meanwhile, Nane was about to take action, cutting off the tentacle of the giant octopus. Everyone attacks together to collect the reward. But something surfaces. A monstrosity looms. It was the Mega Kraken. Source of the week. Risk rating. Intense red. Upon seeing the calamity, the old man thinks they can do nothing against them. He will detonate his explosives. It didn't matter that his companions were close by, but a dagger broke the detonator, and Lime takes a bite. Hian appears. He thinks Sebastian is a piece of shit. The guys in the sea were staggering, unable to deal with the swarm of octopuses, but wasn't using a bomb to blow up their entire armada too much. He must reflect on the matter, and will teach classes on how to make raw octopus. As for Nane, she had used all her energy in her legs previously, so she didn't have much energy left. There were many small octopuses, but they should take care of the boss first. She uses solar flare. She had seen her uncle's skills over and over again, so she had memorized them. Right now, she could replicate his ability. And once close enough to the body, she aims directly at its eyes. But the Kraken easily blocked her power with a tentacle. The beast attacks to kill Nane, but the Leo Saint appears to interpose himself in the attack. She, wandering, imagines what her uncle would have done in that situation. She imagines him wielding his sword while flying against his enemy. But she realizes that's what was actually happening. Jin launches the attack. He uses the skill mountain-piercing greatness, bringing down the 1,000-footer in a single strike. The soldiers claim he only managed to deliver the final blow to one of the small ones, and the Kraken grabs him and swallows him. But Jin breaks the Kraken from the inside and unleashes his lightning attack. Paraphrasing, at the end of the day, whether they have 10 or thousands of arms, they will only be octopuses. He tore them into nice little pieces, so they had to take care of the rest. The attendees idolize Jian. They feel that the stories of the past were not exaggerated. He was actually the strongest hero of all. New messages appear to him. People he didn't know were looking at him with respect and awe. They were beginning to feel reverence. And the reporter reports, an event that will be talked about for a long time has just occurred. Li Jin, the returned hero, defeated the Kraken and the 10,000 arms alone. And in the distance, Jin hears the voice of his niece. She asks if he was okay and notices the bone behind her. But anyway, he broke her spear. For that reason, he will make her a replacement weapon soon. She can't contain her excitement, and the Leo Saint jumps up happily because she was a direct subordinate of him. And if he is offering a weapon to her, that meant he could make a weapon for him too. And since he broke the bone, which cost him a lot of money, the least he could do is reward him with a new weapon. And a green explosion comes out behind Jin. This green fog caused the people from the Leo squad, who inhaled the smoke, to lose consciousness and be controlled by Sebastian. Jin demands what he did to Sublime. He will show something interesting by giving a signal, and the men affected by the smoke take charge of capturing Nane. And Jin, he talks about how beautiful it was to see him crushed like that. It was sublime. Stephen asks what he did to his men and why none of them obeyed his orders. He had given a potion to all his men, and because of this, the chemical reaction makes them only able to hear his command voice. And if he wanted his men to return to normal, he had to listen to him. That was a weapon that Jian himself made. He proposes an offer he cannot refuse. He had to kill Jian so his men would return to normal. And they had something in common, an inferiority complex against Li Jian. He bangs on the walls seeing the hero's abilities, and he bangs on the walls seeing the crafting abilities. But the more they realized, they couldn't break that distance wall. It was the opportunity of his life. He will create for him the best weapon he can have in the world. By combining their forces, they could overcome him. The Saint of Leo wields the sword. Nane yells at him not to do it. He won't forgive her if she hurts her uncle. Stephen, addressing Hyun, thinks it's a unique opportunity, but after throwing the sword at him, he demands. He will never listen to him. He has resolved to surpass Hyun, but he has no time to waste his time over an inferiority complex that won't treat him at the same level of cowardice. The old man couldn't accept that lack of respect by attacking. Leo says that 20 years ago he was a ball of inferiority complexes, but he has passed his limits once. And again, while failing and failing everything due to the impulse to surpass Jin. Then Jin appears next to them, asking how long they were going to take. He had allowed himself to be captured to see what Sebastian was planning, and to see Steve's reaction. But they took too long. He asks him to get out of there. He had a few questions for him. 20 years ago, from Sergei Vladimir's perspective, days before the incursion of the Demon Tower, someone informs him that Legion will die. And he wasn't talking about Hugo's prophecy, but about devising a plan to finish him off. That electrified him. It was the opportunity of his life. But Jin breaks the spacetime rift and shatters Sebastian's flashback. He didn't care about his past. He accepts and will tell him who he was, but he had to ensure his safety. Jin believes he was in no position to ask him for anything. If he made him waste his time, he would take out his tongue and jaw with one blow. Seeing that, he tells him he was Virgo. He wonders if Virgo was actually the mastermind behind all of this. He had to go see his appraiser to investigate the results of the daggers. And they also had to return his hammer. Sebastian trembled at the thought of losing his hammer, and Jin asks the three brothers to take care of Sebastian, releasing Leo's subjects, those of the divine squad of Capricorn. Seeing that their chosen one was defeated, they activate the plan to kill Jin themselves by shooting a missile at him. They planned to send him to hell, but Jin also wanted to show off his new toy, hitting the bomb with the hammer, turning the bomb into fireworks, and Leo's army was ready to take revenge for what they had done. So they make a retreat and run away. Jin yells at him that he couldn't let them escape, asking him to pass him a balanced, durable weapon, and easy to use. Jin tells him there was one here, grabbing one by the leg and throwing it against them. Then, in the red zone, outside the Western Protective Dome, in the European Union, was the Virgo search captain. Jane expresses that this place was extremely creepy. His order was to pass by and see what was happening in that place. The mission he had was to search for missing troops from yesterday. It was difficult, and the red mist and atmosphere were very heavy. They all hear cries for help. They run to save them, but as they advance, the captain feels the cries were coming from everywhere, and they felt repetitive, as if they were recorded. He asks everyone to stop, but when they turn around, no one from his squad is left, and a branch sinisterly asks him to please help him. They were like souls in torment putting him on, and a giant shadow appears behind. At Hugo's house, a few days had passed since the fight in Baoye. Hyun was watching the news talking about him. His name appeared everywhere. He receives a notification. He needs a disciple to activate his divine squad. He also activates his god's eye ability and asks Hyunyuri to look him straight in the eyes. That she has 85% fidelity with Chingu and 81% with the owner of the snake. She wasn't useful to him, as he needed someone who had more fidelity of faith in him. One of the three he had in mind should be able to transform. He asks where they were, but they had left in the morning, and he gets a call. In a flashback of the redhead activates. Cries are heard, "Escape, save me, I don't want to die, please save me." Someone asks him to listen to him. He has to hide in the car until his father arrives. He could think of it as playing hide-and-seek. He had to hide so the monster wouldn't find him. Until that moment, he had to be brave. He had to promise her that he would be brave, with a smile on his face. He yells "Mom" and wakes up. Nane calms him down. Hugo also asks him to calm down. After all, he always got very nervous, or dreamed when they were going to see his mother. And Nane gets an idea. Now that he was awake, she would give him his birthday gift. She said he needed a divine artifact that could store Gemini's magical power, so his dad. And she bought it for him. She was happy, as he was very happy and was always sad on his birthday. Nane tells him that he must always be happy, so that his mother doesn't feel sad. Hugo says nothing, just grips the handle harder out of rage. In room 808, Chung Hiwo, Nane is telling stories about what happened these last few days, about her uncle, about the battle, and the different events. She was very excited to tell him everything, but she would talk more when he woke up. It was his mother. Hugo, with his head down, lay outside the door and a call to the shadow. Today was an important day for him and his family, which is why he wanted to avoid any work commitments. But the countries of the European alliance were looking for him for a simple disaster extermination. He asks if Virgo was not nearby. He was the strongest, but they wouldn't call him unless it was an emergency. Virgo had already refused any combat with that calamity. Moreover, it was one of the most dangerous calamities. He had already run into her in the past. It was the one that destroyed the airport 10 years ago. The blood frog. In the national jurisdiction of the EU, Virgo, Belgium. Hyun was talking to Sung-hae about whether he wanted to be his disciple, but he couldn't. He thinks that dealing would be difficult. He apologized. He thinks that maybe he didn't know his nephew well. They hadn't even told him it was his birthday. They seemed to be hiding something. Something must have happened on his birthday. And just then the appraiser, Kim Young, arrives. He had used a portal to reach the city of Virgo. He asks why it was the city of Virgo, first of all. He explains that Europe was always culturally influenced by religion. After the appearance of the saints and the grouping system taking root in the world, Europe would become an enormous theocracy, and one could see on every dome who protects them everywhere. Their faith must be very solid, but they were going to get to the point. He creates a soundproof barrier and shows him the information from the dagger that stabbed him 20 years ago. He managed to capture some memories left in it, and after investigating the memory fragments, the culprit who stabbed him was Kevin, the Saint of Virgo. At Hugo's house, he asks the fairy, Larry Quinn, to investigate why Sun Hei rejected his offer to join his squad. He had to plot something. He was still in Gemini and had already lost all faith. After a few minutes, Sun Hei arrives to ask him a favor. He was in luck. He could get the information through that favor. He asks her to open the teleportation portal to the secret library of Gemini. We are told that the Gemini library was a place where forbidden books existed that only the superior saints could read. Last time he threw away his insignia, so it was very difficult for him to enter. He must find out something extremely important to him. She accepts, but he had to tell her all his intentions without lying to her. What he wanted to find was the ability of summoning, of spirits, to allow summoning beings from other worlds. The scene changes. Jin is at a train station thinking about the dagger's declaration. But he knows there was a powerful evil being involved, strong enough to harm not only a saint but a divine god. It could be John Lois. But he couldn't attack the gods. He was convinced that the idiot who stabbed him was deeply connected to the disasters of the unknown civilization. He needed to recover his strength as soon as possible to confront him. And finally, the elite troops of Hugo's saint, others, arrive. Now they are inside the catastrophe area, burning and getting rid of the small calamities. They ask what those branches were. They made walking difficult. Hyun thinks it's a coincidence. He didn't expect them to be negotiating with Virgo, who was leading them there. They had come by Sagittarius' request. They received a commission to deal with the disasters, and Hugo's saint went to meet with the European government to give a detailed explanation of what they were going to do. He had accepted the job because they were special circumstances. The monster that desired the powers of all the saints. They ask if he had never heard of the blood fog monster. At the political headquarters of the European Fiscal Department, they explain the situation to Hugo. The calamity had appeared 10 days ago. Virgo had moved, but his forces were reduced to 0. Additionally, Lord Virgo was dealing with a similar rank at sea. That's why they were seeking help from other divine squads, and he and his friend were the best for the job. And there were no other available people. Hugo thinks it's an obvious trick. The saint and Virgo knew they would accept. They just had to name the blood fog calamity, and he would never say no to that job. From Jin's side, they tell him that his chosen one's wife died because of the red fog. She tried to protect her son. She and her first disciple, the divine squad captain, Li Wen, died. Hyung knew that guy. He was the one who helped them carry things 20 years ago. Now he understood why he avoided talking about his wife. He never thought that could have happened. Speaking honestly, the Hugo he knew wasn't like that. He knew how good he was, as he taught him how to fight. When he was at his best, he trusted his back without hesitation. That Hugo of the past was one of the strongest among the 12 saints. They ask him to tell them all the details that happened to Hugo. They agree, but it wasn't easy to talk about it. But since it was him, they would tell him. That horrible incident happened 10 years ago, on Sun Hei's 7th birthday. In the past of the redhead and his mother Chun Hee-wo, honorary member of Sagittarius, they were at the airport. And Lee Hee-won, Sagittarius' first disciple, was also there. Sun Hai asks for some food, so Lee Hae-won will go buy it. While waiting, he hears two brothers arguing about a mistake they made, but they run out because they didn't want to die. The mother is about to tell them to leave, but an enormous shadow appears in front of their eyes. Everything goes dark in the airport, and a red fog starts appearing from the ground. The mother takes her son and tells Hae-won that what was happening was really bad. The first disciple drops the food bags to the ground, and the calamity lunges without hesitation to eat the mother and son. But a push saves his life. Lee Hee-won had given his life to save them, and even on his deathbed, he gives a thumbs up. And he smiles as a sign that everything would be fine. Seeing what happened, the mother runs away to save her son. The scene was cruel. Many were dead, others wounded screaming for help, and the mother asking her son to hide until his father arrived. Until then, he should wait bravely for his father. She asks him to promise her, and a vine surrounds and captures her. In Hanwei's mind, he only thought about telling him a bunch of stories. He cried, asking for forgiveness, and branches approach to catch him too. And a flash of fire appears in the scene. It was Hugo, asking if he was okay. He was fine, but his mother was not. He understood. He manages to spot his wife, calms down, still sees a way to save her, tries to pull her out. But the souls of his friend and his wife appear, asking for help. That freezes him. He loses all sense of reality, and a branch pierces his ribs. The calamity smiles and sucks out his celestial power, but the saints enter the scene. They were there to help him. The three attack with their best powers, but the calamity had the ability to swallow magic. Thanks to that, it could regenerate. The calamity attacks. Its attack was devastating. It could even break the barrier. They were in trouble, but a fifth chosen one appears. Using branches of the Golden Rule, the Gemini Saint asks them to use teleportation. That calamity was too strong. Even the four of them together couldn't defeat her. They had to send her somewhere else. Hugo screams that they couldn't do that. The souls of all the people present couldn't be saved. And he could fight too. She was reaching her limit. The barrier wouldn't last long. She demands that he cast the spell. There was no more time. She accepts. Hugo screams desperately not to do it. That day all the media and all the people criticized Hugo. They only praised the other saints. But on the other hand, Sagittarius, who had been protecting them, was criticized by the citizens. It wasn't just that he didn't stop the disaster, but there were more victims than necessary due to Hugo's actions. Rumors spread that he preferred to save his family over other people. He was too selfish. Hugo apologized publicly, but his country did not accept it. They came out to harshly criticize him again and again. They shouted everything imaginable at him. His family members had died because of him. These four are gathered, and we are told that the calamity had absorbed half of Hugo's strength. People kept criticizing him. On the way to the hospital, his subordinates tell him that he didn't have to carry all the blame alone. He also fought and lost a lot after the disaster. He couldn't stay silent. He had to tell what really happened. He had to tell them that if they hadn't teleported the calamity, they could have saved the souls. He replies that if there was a way to save them, they didn't die, their souls were just taken. They just had to capture the red fog and recover the souls. But at that moment, he was weak. They even took half of his powers. None of those present could have defeated her. They shout that if he let things be like this, they would hate him forever. But he replies that it was fine to blame him. He couldn't keep the promise he made to Jeon to protect Korea. He cannot say anything. It didn't matter what the criticism was or how much they hated him. He knows that everything is frustrating, but he needs to endure all of that. He thanks her for the concern. The captain calms her down. He explains that Hugo had been at the hospital for hours affected because he still had faith that they would wake up. When Hugo goes to open the door, his son is heard asking his mother for forgiveness. Because of him, they had stayed longer at the airport. Because of him, she and his uncle were in that state. He asks for forgiveness again and again. Hugo breaks down for the first time. Tears run down his cheeks. Now he was telling what happened. At that moment, he should have told his son it wasn't his fault, but he couldn't show him that he was also broken. He thinks it's Sun Hae. He still thinks he was the culprit. Hyun asks the captain to let him cry. When he spoke, it was annoying. Anyway, now that the blood fog has reappeared, they need to settle old debts. This time, he will destroy it completely. From the frog side, she says that the remaining powers of the sun god came on their own. Now it will swallow everyone, the city and them. Hugo claims they had to burn all the calamities, and his subordinates were behaving very friendly. They gave him many gifts, but it was clearly because he had talked about his history. Jin receives Rena's voice. She informs him that she just spoke with Junhee and will tell him what happened. From the redhead's perspective, what he wanted to find was the spiritual call. The spiritual call is an ability that can summon beings from other worlds to appear. That's why he wanted to save his mother and his uncle. He wanted to recover all the people who had sacrificed themselves because of him. In the library, he was going to donate the bracelet so the book would give him the knowledge. He was looking for the page to find the spell, but the blonde appears again. He won't let him talk to the dead. It was John C. Woo. He says he only thought he was important because he had John on his side. But at that moment, he was alone. And to watch his father and his uncle. They were desperate, showing him a vision of the scene. Hugo was signaling today's withdrawal. The captain notifies Group 1, Group 2, but Group 3 did not respond. And please, once more, he makes himself heard. Jin asks him to calm down. He is too agitated now. He had to remain calm for the battle. He will take revenge after 10 long years. and vine-shaped branches shoot out into the earth. The frog attacks, but Jin manages to stop it. He asks if he was the one who affected his nephew and his friend. He immediately realizes that this calamity was dangerous. Hyun believes he has very big dreams, regenerating his leg. It seemed to intend to devour humans and cities alike, but they were there to spoil the meal. Today they would cut open its stomach from side to side. Hugo shouts that the combined attacks were being effective. Everyone must prepare the second wave of arrows. They had arrows made of mana. The frog tries to attack those with the arrows, but they dodge. Jin thinks the roots are annoying. He asks Lime for scissors. He's going to do some pruning. That hurts the frog a lot. In fact, it completely destroys and kills it. They think they couldn't see how strong Jin was. The redhead shouts that they had won, but John Siwoo thinks it's a difficult scenario. But that calamity could eat all the surrounding powers by ordering itself to regenerate. The frog regenerated like a titan from Shinjeki, and they realize that the dome that was over the city was surrounded by blood fog. Jin realizes that the frog had penetrated the dome with its roots underground. The general asks them to raise the bows again, while Gamabunta the blonde mocks. Now the frog could devour the entire city. What was once a refuge for people was now a magic reservoir for the blood fog. There were many more people than at the airport. He couldn't wait to see the show that would unfold. The redhead can't believe it. He remembers the two brothers talking in the past and realizes that one of the brothers was John C. Wah. The blonde laughs. How could he take so long to find out? He expresses that his father was an idiot. He didn't realize that everything was a trap set by his mother to remove his credibility. He reproaches him that many people were killed that day. He didn't feel a shred of guilt, but he replies that they simply had bad luck. The redhead attacks. Yang Wei thinks he was going to bring his uncle again, scaring him. But it was the same strategy, but with differences. Now he himself appears, hitting him with all his might, stunning him. He takes the relic from his hand. He revived Gamabunta with that artifact. He should be able to use it to eliminate him. Because of that, he teleports. Meanwhile, elite forces shoot thousands of arrows. The frog defends itself, and Jin uses the pruning ability. It gets overconfident from its incredible cut, and an arm is detached from its body. Hugo appears to defend him. Jin unleashes his power in one blow, but it does nothing to him, thanks to the divine ability of Red Eye. 20 years ago in the Devil's Tower, we are told that those calamities that had that power were incredibly stronger than red-level calamities. They were almost impossible to attack. They came from hell itself. Jin activates his ability to see enemy weaknesses and realizes there were 3 cores. But the most dangerous core wasn't visible. It was the one that gave it power based on souls. They realized they were using the dome as a power source. He asks his forces to destroy the city dome, but the calamity doesn't let them. And it traps them and appropriates their souls. Again, souls in anguish start screaming for salvation, causing shock to those present. Hyun thinks he knew how to anger his opponents, and a portal appears inside the dome. It was the redhead. He realizes a blood tree was in front of his eyes. It was a tree exhaling red fog. It was all the fault of that tree, activating his magic power. They show the events on television. The blood fog that appeared 10 years ago was once again taking the lives of many. Rescue teams couldn't enter either. It was impossible to estimate how many casualties there would be from this event. No one could do anything. No divine rank could face that monstrosity. But one person can be seen, but they don't report who it is, because a branch breaks the drone. Hyun could only dodge the branches, and Hugo is hit. His divine relic is destroyed, and he is slammed against the ground. John thinks about helping him, but souls in anguish ask for help again, distracting him. He thinks that trick was definitely dirty. The calamity grabs him and drags him through the building and sends him underground with its power. Looking at the archers, he tells everyone they were next, but they are inflicted with pain. Someone was hurting its tree. The redhead delivers his best blows. Because of that, innocent people, his uncle and his mother are in a coma. The calamity, feeling in danger, jumps to save its core, but Hugo asks for his bow. And he sets his plan B in motion, and a pillar-sized arrow pierces the beast. He activated his relic, White Soldier's Arsenal arrow. He thought one arrow wouldn't be enough, so he carefully prepared the rest. He shoots arrows to fix its body to the ground, and his archers launch ropes to immobilize it. But they couldn't withstand the great power the calamity possessed. They know they can't defeat it, but they can stop it. On Yang Wei's side, he attacks with rage and tearful eyes, managing to break the tree and the city barrier. Blood Fog laments over its city. Its power source had been shattered. The souls that were attached to the trunk of the tree were disappearing. Yang Wei was waking up. He had passed out, but the tree was already broken. That made him very happy. Now he can see the sky. He did it, but a roar of fire sounds in the distance. The city had melted. The subjects didn't know what had happened. A huge explosion had occurred, and their saint had protected them. The calamity was using Sagittarius's power, which it took 10 years ago. It stares fixedly at the culprit who broke its tree. Hugo couldn't believe his son was in that situation. He realizes he had broken the dome. The calamity will definitely chew him up and eat him alive. The calamity would finish taking the other half of his power. Hugo resists, but an evil aura of unknown origin is trapping him. He locks Yang Wei in a capsule to protect him. Gamabunta laughs. It finally swallowed all the power of the sun god, and a sword rises from the ground. The calamity feels ready to face him. Now it has all the remaining power of the sun god, but Hyun screams that it's not over yet. From Hugo's perspective, he feels his whole body is numb. In the end, he achieved nothing. He couldn't save his wife, nor his friend, nor his son. He couldn't even take revenge on the damned red fog. He thinks this is the end, but he catches a glimpse of a light out of the corner of his eye. He sees the fragment of power they had taken from him before. His power is in front of his eyes, but he couldn't do anything about it. His memory was becoming blurry. He wondered what he was fighting for, and a memory of his family appears to him. It was a scene where they had taken a picture. Everyone looked very good that day. He opens his eyes. He will not collapse like that. He will not end up shaming his family. He cannot give up. He has to reach it. It repeats itself again. He has to reach it. His body wouldn't hold out any longer, and a shadow of light can be seen. It was Hyun screaming his name. He still had a lot of work to do. He had to take his hand. 30 years ago in Arabia, Hugo was facing a calamity that ended up eating him. He thought that was the end. He regretted it because he hadn't even managed to get married. But he appeared to save him. His friend was always the same. Whenever he was in danger, he would see him come to his aid. Jean Wayne asks his father to wake up. Hyun analyzes him and realizes his friend's power was completely recovered. He advises him not to worry. About his father, everything would be more than fine, and he goes on the attack against the calamity. He will take care of it. He reproaches him that because of him, his friend was despised by the whole world, and his nephew never celebrated his birthday. All he had to do was break its core. The calamity was in trouble. It had to return to the underworld. It could die, but it still had strength left to finish off the sun. And the father. It is their defeat, but it will keep its power again. Jin shouts that he was confused. Hugo might be an idiot, but he was an extremely powerful being. The reporters in the distance wonder what was happening. A powerful column of fire emerged from the ruins. In an instant, it was midnight, but everything was lit up. Nane was watching what happened, and Hallie says, it's been a long road, but his father had recovered all his power. The calamity screams, it had to return its power. Hugo uses celestial radiance. That ability burned everything impure. Hyun wanted to take his life himself, but he won't be the one to finish it. He swaps positions with Hugo and with a smile on his face, tells him to finish it. Hugo remembers everything that happened, his son crying, feeling guilty for his mother's death. But he tells him no, it wasn't his fault. After the explosion, Hyun thinks that caused too much disaster, but now they really destroyed everything. The cores and the bodies were reduced to ashes. They couldn't do anything more. Hugo thanks Hyun. He replies that the boy he knows would never thank him, but for today, he will accept them. And by the way, he found something while fighting that thing. He found the core of the souls. He thinks that was the thing that kept the souls. He uses the snake ability and breaks the spiritual seal. He was freeing the souls that thing had devoured. Now the people who had been consumed could wake up one by one. Yang Wei asks if it was really possible. Hyun replies, when those souls return to their respective bodies, they will wake up. His mother will too. He heard that his birthday was recently. It's a little late, but happy birthday. From Stephen Marker's perspective, he is defeating the Kraken with his super bone. He feeds it, takes it for a walk, goes on adventures, but returns to reality and wakes up. He spies on all his subjects who were going to attack Jin and Capricorn, but they had to bring his super bone. They get angry. They couldn't believe he was still obsessed with the bone. They were going to put him to sleep again, and someone shouts. It was a miracle. The people who had been asleep, due to the red fog, for 10 years were waking up. Everyone was regaining their consciousness. They comment on the event in the news. They were receiving news that thousands of people were waking up. They were on the outskirts of the Western Protection Dome, and after a tough battle, the Ireligion and Sagittarius's force have defeated the blood fog. They couldn't describe what happened. That event had no precedent currently. It was expected that the people who hadn't woken up yet would do so soon. The biggest noise from the news. Not only had it lost the blood fog, but it also lost the rosary. It made a big mess. It understood why they were defeated, but it couldn't be defeated by such a weak guy. Now they will be exposed to what people say. They had to eliminate any trace of them. They had to go to the hospital to capture Yang Wei. They tell Hugo that his wife was still asleep, but she is expected to wake up soon. Hyun asks the redhead to go to his mother. Yang Wei asks his father if he was going too. Hugo starts crying because his son was worrying about him. Hugo gives a very long speech, but he couldn't go as he had things to do. The redhead accepts and leaves. At the hospital, he thinks he can finally see his mother, but first, he has to go buy flowers. He couldn't arrive empty-handed. The older blonde wonders where that brat could be, and how a hospital could keep trash in bed for 10 years. In the European Union, they were interviewing the Archer forces, and Jian was in a bar. He was analyzing another piece of dagger from the unknown civilization. That one was on the Coors shell. All the evidence pointed to Virgo being responsible. It wasn't very clear, but the answers would definitely come to light. He tells Hugo that now they will capture Virgo, but he asks him to rest a little. Not everyone was as resilient as him. Hyun expresses they are so weak these days. In my time, they didn't even have a chance to breathe before attacking me. He asks him why he hadn't followed his son, and Hugo didn't feel capable of looking at his wife and his friend in the eyes, and they still had a lot of work to do. They have problems with Virgo and problems with Libra. They have to find the culprit who caused all that. He tells the forces they can return to Korea now. He didn't need them, they were too much of a bother. Everyone had to return, except that guy. They had only sent Sun Hae. He was sure it was full of guys who would be looking for him. Hugo panics, but Jin calms him down. He had given him a coin that would be useful very soon. It was a birthday gift. Yang Wei walking sees the families. He is very happy, and next to him, a person has activated his powers. He attacks him. He tries to defend himself with his shield, asks him to keep his powers. They were in a hospital. He expresses that he has improved quite a bit if he could stop an A-level attack, but he attacks him again and breaks the entire floor of the building. And on the other side, in Virgo's office, the Virgo saint himself arrives demanding. Kevin Hazard, he was humanity's strongest prosecutor, a crescent moon agent, an icy silver knight, the commander of the Corps in the glacial cold. His Virgo constellation was worthy of admiration. It was presumed to have an incomparable power scale. The only bad thing about Kevin Hazard was his huge ego. He wanted an explanation of what happened in his city. Jin was all over the news. That should be him. He was like that because Hyun had never beaten him in a competition. Hyun was always the one who landed the final blow. He appeared in interviews. He even beat him at karaoke. I think the one there is Hugo, friend. He's very handsome. This time, he will take him down with his own hands. The office worker gives the orders. For them to enter the bar, he had already arrived. Everyone shouts not to move, but a blast of music stuns them. It was Hugo and his forces singing to the beat of the music. The Virgo general shouts at them that they were a disgrace to the divine ranks. Aijan punches him. They should shut up, they were ruining the show. She argues that they were the office workers' orders, but this cloaked guy appears. He tells him he had little time. He apologizes for the acts of his subordinates, but he needed his help. He was the head of the Virgo sanctuary. He asks him to please get rid of Kevin Hazard, the saint of his own divine rank. As Kevin was looking for Legion with his ability, his mind was wandering. He realizes something and breaks the office worker's glasses. He was the culprit, making his mind wander. He was making him waste time. It was a Scorpion ability. He asks him one more time where Legion was. Depending on his answer, he will see if his body is saved or not. In the Virgo sanctuary, Jin was completely destroying it. The sanctuary head thinks that was for the best. His Virgo group at that moment was divided in two. It was completely a tyranny, and he needed help to overthrow him. As a reward, Badala the Piercing Consecration. That was the master weapon Hyun used 20 years ago. All the subordinates inside the Virgo sanctuary had fallen, and the sanctuary door opens. And a halt is heard. It was Kevin Hazard, the saint of Virgo. He expresses that he is glad to see someone so strong. Hyun thought the same. 20 years had passed. He never thought waiting at the top was so pleasant. There was Hugo and the bastard who had betrayed him. It was nice. He swept them away all at once. They ask who had made their vassal god look like that. That was another reason to take him down. But Hugo breaks the attack. He says he will have to fight the first one, since Hyun was still drunk. Hugo thinks he succeeded. Hyun makes a call. He is in front of Kevin's sanctuary's sacred relics, and they were about to have a fight. And Hyun asks them to get out of the way. He was about to give him what he wanted. He is glad he finally steps forward. He asks his allies not to interfere. It was only a battle of adults. Hyun is surprised. He was losing his touch. Hazard had stopped his attack, and a chill ran through his blood. And the relic was unable to resist the cold, consequently breaking. He dodges his attacks, and he takes out his hammer, deflecting the attack, kicks him. After that, they had to get serious. Jin expresses that he hadn't seen that sword in a long time. It was the binary relic Frost. Infernal. He tells Jin how he was going to move now. The infernal Frost had frozen all his limbs without realizing it. He has let his guard down. He was much weaker than 20 years ago attacking him. He had nowhere to escape. But Jin swaps bodies, and the traitor is pierced by the saint's sword. Jin had been annoyed by his nonsense, so he hits him with the hammer, making a home run. And upon hitting him, a wall falls. It was the celestial condemnation. He thinks he is finished. Hugo, paraphrasing, was contradictory. The man who betrayed Jian in the demonic tower was betrayed by one of his subordinates. But he hadn't betrayed anyone. Hugo shouts at him not to lie. He had stabbed Jian in the demonic tower and set a trap. But he replies that he should stop the nonsense, that he should shut up. He couldn't blame him for something like that, firing his sword. But the sanctuary head stops him and ties his arm. It was an absolute order with Libra's ability. Since it had reached that point, he would have to get rid of everyone. He uses Libra's ability and swaps the body of the Virgo saint. But Kevin uses his ability and cuts off his arm to free himself. He laughs. The expression he had before cutting off his arm was unique. All to avoid becoming tribute to the sacred spirit, but that was enough. His arm was also very valuable. Everyone tries to stop him, but it was too late. Everyone is welcome to the unknown space. Hyun had already experienced that sensation of dark and unpleasant energy. The sanctuary head explains that this was the view of hell. In that place, they would dig their graves. The allies try to avenge their saint, but they cannot use their abilities. Their saints and everyone present have lost connection with their zodiac saint. That space was a power isolation area of Libra. They could not use saint powers in that place. Jannah tries to get closer, but arms from the ground catch him. Those arms were not simply arms. He shouts that he doesn't remember. They were the things he fought for 20 years, the ones that brought him to the brink of death. Jannah was right. They weren't like the red fog that was summoned by force. They were true disasters that were in the demonic tower. At the hospital, they were beating up Yang Wei. That was the difference between an S-class and an A-class. Whatever he does, he will never be able to do anything against him. The redhead sees that this was his mother's piece, hits him, and sends him and his mother out of the building with a single attack. As he and his mother are in free fall, he remembers that no one can help him, not his sister nor his father. He didn't know what to do, but he couldn't do anything. He had no mana left, he was too weak, but he had to react. He was the only one who could do something, hugging his mother. His uncle and his father never gave up. He won't either. He will protect her, even if it costs him his life. and Yafuko welcomes his indomitable spirit. She asks if he wanted her power. He accepts. He will do whatever it takes to save his mother. The blonde is surprised to see that he still had a little mana left, and on Hyun's side. And the others, everyone was trapped by the hands. He had planned that plan for a long time, and finally it was working. He thought he tried so hard for some level-less cockroaches. It was a shame he couldn't use his abilities. Hyun thinks he talked too much. He would never give up in a situation like this. Even when he fought while his body was being destroyed, he never thought of giving up. Even when he wandered the demonic tower alone for 20 years, he never thought of giving up. He was a pitiful lunatic. Make no mistake, that didn't even come close to a disaster. He thinks he was just boasting and attacks him with dozens of arms belonging to Yang Wei. He lands a force-charged blow on the blonde. He said to give up, but he would never surrender. He couldn't. His mother, his uncle were his responsibility now. It was his turn to defend them. He will protect them with his own hands. A notification appears for Lijiang. He has passed the trial. The first disciple has been born. The first Ophiuchus saint has been born. This makes him use an ability from God's Bible, which allows him to write verses of his own story. His enormous power breaks the barrier of hell. He would like to take charge. But first he had to go for his weapon. He breaks all the chains with brute force. He will never forget that feeling, even after 20 years. It was celestial punishment, rank double. The 8th artifact and his masterpiece. He proclaims that his weapon hasn't eaten for 20 years, so he had to feed it now. He wanted to hear it speak. Didn't he say that even insects squirm when stepped on? He was different because he never gave up. But what about him? Will he give up or fight like a man? He asks his saint to stop them, but Jin defends himself. He was happy. It had been a long time since he fought with his wonderful weapon. Thanks, upon breaking the hell barrier, the powers returned. July meteor, celestial splendor. The forces of Virgo and Sagittarius were back in the fight. But Jin shouts at them that pose stunk. He couldn't believe they got away with it. He had to get out of that place, but the Virgo saint seeks revenge for his right arm. But something strange comes out to defend him. A sinister voice appears. It was Jeon Louis Murin. He had some urgent matters. He will give his traitor as tribute, creating a multi-armed beast. Jeon thinks he felt very powerful, so he uses his ability with his recovered sword. The perspective of the taster is seen, and observes a giant explosion. In the mound of rubble, they think he could only use 85% of his strength. He doesn't know how much more. He must strive to use 100. The Virgo saint thought he was a crazy bastard. He had completely eliminated his sanctuary. In a temple, Jean-Louis explains that his mission had failed. He only did the best he could. The Libra saint throws him to the ground with a spell. He hopes that next time he succeeds in such a simple mission. On the other hand, Kevin tells them that Scorpion was the one who stabbed him, but Hugo couldn't believe his words. Hallie couldn't be. They had checked all the records of the daggers from the unknown civilization. He thinks the dagger they mention looks familiar. He investigated and then found it. He found those 5 objects while investigating Scorpion. Each one was linked to an unknown civilization. He says that the Scorpion beings were dangerous. They were close to beings that threatened humanity. Nanae appears expressing that she doesn't believe that is true. They had said that was Scorpion, but he had already been to the Scorpion sanctuary before coming there. Hallie helped him in many ways. She seemed like a good person. It was too early to draw those conclusions. Kevin shouts astonished. He asks what kind of place the Scorpion sanctuary was, and Jeon's stomach growls. So they will go eat something first. Jeon was getting angry. He couldn't control his strength. Kevin calls him out on behaving like a child, and also calls out Hugo on how he could raise his children like that. The protagonist realizes that he had become much stronger thanks to the fight. Hugo looks happy for his revenge, and he feels the same way. And Nanae hands him something Hallie had given her. It was one of his 8 relics. He remembers that she ran away every time she saw him. He wonders why she had that. He thought she hated him. That weapon was colluding with the unknown civilization. Hazard affirms that he was right. Scorpion was related to the unknown civilization. Besides, she saw him as a target in ancient times, poisoning his food. Scorpion must be the one behind that. The taster wanted to see that bottle. Hugo says to hand it over. Hazard thinks they are too rude for distrusting him. The taster believes what had happened was shameful. The Inquisition had conspired with another saint and were manipulated. Not to mention they took control of the tower. He even manipulated troops. Jin Express, the information they got made them suspect Virgo. They were so meticulous. All the clues were directed towards Virgo. They were so obvious that the answer was questionable. He didn't know if the one who stabbed him had white hair, since he only had memories of the dagger. But since that wasn't the case, he had to rule out the other suspects. Libra, Cancer, and Scorpion. Now he was sure that Kevin wasn't the culprit of his stabbing. He loved seeking attention, but he couldn't do something like that. He is thinking of visiting Scorpion. He was sure she was involved in that. He is also curious about the gift she sent him. Besides, he made Sun Hei a high, but it will take time to see him again. Hugo asks what he just said. He confirms that Sun Hei was his first saint. Nane behind him complains why she hadn't been the chosen one, but she thinks she just had to tell her brother to give up his position and give it to her. As for the redhead, he had finally defeated him. A doctor thinks it was incredible. Thanks to him, he had easily finished off Taewo. He was the director of Gemini. He complains that he couldn't just steal that grimoire. There are things in the world that he couldn't understand. He says he can take it, that he no longer needed it, but they cannot leave things like this. He had many questions. Besides, he had betrayed Gemini, he had to go with them. And a person in bed also hears those words. Sun Hei thinks he was behaving like that again, without considering others' points of view, and forcing only what he wanted. She would no longer tolerate his attitudes. They try to perform an invocation by taking power from Sun Hei, but something was happening. It was too much energy, and thanks to that they summoned the strongest of their invocations, Halcyon, the first fairy king. The king expresses that they had summoned him, but the boy's aura was what brought him to that place. Seeing the amount of power the boy had, he thinks about switching religions, but that couldn't be possible. He was the fairy king, an authority of Gemini, but he thinks he has lost connection with the Holy Spirit of Gemini, and he doesn't even know where they went. It didn't seem like much to swear his allegiance. They resign themselves and think about attacking Sun High by themselves. He uses his abilities. He was willing to fight, but he had run out of serpent energy because the fairy had devoured all his energy. He asks him to then do something to defend him, but he didn't have any life contract. They didn't have a relationship yet. The director laughs at his victory, but the wall collapses. The director only manages to see a shadow approaching him and is struck by a huge blow. The guy screams, who dared to threaten his beloved Sun Hei? It was Hei One, the ancient leader of the Sagittarius divine constellation. But there were only two of them. They were nothing against his forces. They outnumbered them, but with an epic entrance. The Sagittarius forces enter the scene. They had to surrender before a hole was punched in their heads. A portal opens and they are asked to retreat. The grimoire plan had been a failure, and in front of his eyes, Sun Hei had the one who had sacrificed his life for him. A long time had passed before he reached his waist height, and now he was at eye level. He didn't know where to start, but he was very happy that he was awake. The fairy king realizes the book, and an angry voice is heard. Don't play dumb. He knew Uncle Jin had become a saint, and the uncle appears to tell him he was there. The fairy king expresses that he was even more nervous than when he was surrounded by the Gemini force. He asks him to escape and transfer him to his divine constellation, and he jumps off the building to escape Nane. He had yielded to him being born first, so now he couldn't yield being the saint. And when they fall to the ground, a Nane Sun Hei children how have you been? Is heard. It was his mother. Then at the transit and teleportation station were Heon, Kevin, the Gemini captain, and Hugo, who was crying. They had informed him that his wife had woken up. She hadn't fully recovered, but she was in good health. They also tell him they had expelled the Sagittarius force, and Tiwoo had disappeared. They had found the culprits from 10 years ago. They were Jo Tiwoo and Jang Siwoo, the two sons of Libra saints. The captain recounts that in the past, Hugo had figured all that out. He asks him if his children had been the culprits of the incident. She only believed he couldn't do anything with his half-saint level. She will talk to her children and punish him for what happened, but he was the culprit for not having prevented that disaster. In any case, he was the one who couldn't save Korea. He had two options: reveal the truth, defeat the calamity, save his wife and the citizens of Korea. But if he told everyone what happened and didn't defeat the calamity, she would take care of his children, who, if he remembered correctly, were named Nane and Sun Hei. He had to choose. This is why Hugo couldn't do anything in the past. He was the one most affected by the events. Jian asks him to do what is necessary to find his brothers. We are told that the real reason Sun Hei and Nane were in other divine constellations, was to ensure the safety of both of them. And now that he thinks about it, his disciple must have a mission, and Jian needed an adult to complete some traits. He asks Hugo if he wanted to go pray at his altar and become an adult. The Sagittarius saint gets angry. He couldn't touch his contractor. Kevin asks Jian if he didn't want to join his divine constellation, since his was complete garbage. The captain recounts that he tried to convince Nane to join his divine constellation. It was their destiny to be together, but she ignores him completely. Nane also tells them that if they went to Scorpion, it was very difficult to use the normal routes. The sea and air routes. The sea and air routes were blocked by the unknown civilization. That's why the correct route was through Leo's. When their negotiations are over, he will go see them. He tells the two that he saw how they fought against Blood Nebel. Both had been great. Hyun believes he had raised his children well, and Hugo affirms that no matter how difficult it was, his children's happy faces were priceless. And he looks at his captain. He looks strange. Did he have dark feelings against his daughter? Why wasn't he responding? And in the end, everyone ends up fighting. Kevin was also going to prove his innocence, and when they defeated everyone, to go out and save them and fill himself with glory. They were ready to go to the coordinates of Washington, D.C., United States. At a table, several people from the Leo constellation were gathered. They believe they should give a good welcome to their guests who came to visit them. Welcome to the Battle Arena Festival. A few hours ago in Washington, D.C., they were admiring a statue that was clearly gigantic, and Kevin wanted the same one. He should build an equal one for himself, and a group of people asks him to please follow them. John asks them to leave. He wasn't there for them, but they ask him to calm down. They came to deliver an invitation to him for a legendary battle. This event was unique of its kind. It was simply to select the one they most wanted to produce a unique fight between him and his saint. As for Stephen, they tell him that they had prepared a match for him against Lijon. He recently lost against him due to an unfair attack, but everyone knows that 30 years ago he defeated him. And luckily, they had just confirmed that Lijon had accepted. The Leo Saint couldn't believe it. Already in the dressing rooms, before the event, the captain expresses to him that the event was a success. The Coliseum was full, and the broadcast was breaking viewership records. Stephen sees the stage and goes to the restroom, where he meets the protagonist. He tells him to be calm. A dead person wasn't going to do anything to him, and Stephen tells his story. 20 years ago, his death turned out to be very difficult for him. Back then, he was the symbol of humanity, and humanity was plunged into sadness the day he died. It might be difficult, but he also felt that sadness. He had no choice but to take ownership of his name and proclaim himself the strongest man. It was to maintain order. He managed to make humanity believe something so that it wouldn't collapse. But Hyun thinks he has strayed from the topic. He expresses that this arena was only entertainment. There was no need to fight, simply a show. So wouldn't he prefer a draw? As for the arena, the host, ladies and gentlemen, today we will witness a legendary battle. Who will be the winner of the tournament? Stephen remains calm. Lee Hyun had promised to cooperate. Jin had changed the rules. They proposed facing all the fighters. Stephen believes that was the protagonist's plan, to say he couldn't beat them because he was against so many people, and thus transform the fight into a star exhibition. With that approach, everyone could be a winner. And the host continues. He will show the video of the confrontation between Jin and Stephen Marker from 30 years ago. Stephen did not want him to show that video. The protagonist asks if he was angry, and to tell everyone that he had used a video program. The Leo Saint yells at him that he had only paid 50 billion to use it. And then the battle begins. Everyone goes against the protagonist. Hugo is bewildered by what he had paid, and Kevin couldn't stand to watch them fight like that. He would also join the battle. Hugo and the captain must stop him. The Leo members think their allies cannot interfere in the battle, and those present, as they had bet, they couldn't let the Leo people enter the fight, and due to an unexpected situation, the entire crowd in the arena jumped to start fighting. On the streaming signal, everyone was dying of laughter. In the VIP area, they had to stop things, and director Oliver, who had plotted this event, meets Nane. She expresses that he had never used honorifics towards her. She asks whose he really was. Meanwhile, in the battle royale, John tells Stephen to show himself, landing blows like crazy. And now it was his turn. The Leo Saint casts aside his cowardice and activates his power. He attacks with all his might, and Hyun lands a punch in his face. and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. Stephen thinks they are going to kill him, but Kevin appears so they fight against him too, and an explosion is heard. It was Nane. She asks him to reveal his true identity, and it was Sylvia, one of the 10 chosen by Pisces. Those present are surprised to see that Oliver was a woman. Kevin thinks they are stealing his spotlight, and next to him is a person with his sword thrust through. He expresses that it wasn't what they were thinking, he didn't mean to do it, and a voice says, "It was strange. How the hell did you know it was me? You have a good eye." Hyun recognizes that arrogant voice. It was Libra. She thinks it was expected from the owner of the divine constellation competing with her. That was incredible. Kevin expresses that his hidden motives were obvious. He asks Jin how he survived that tower. "I didn't expect to see your face." Once again, seeing his face, he admits he was strong. He asks Kevin why he didn't pierce Jin's heart for sure. He couldn't give excuses. Everyone knew he had done it. The crab, the fish, and the goat knew it. But Saint Sans, Hugo expresses he shouldn't be fooled by his words. He is disappointed in Hugo. His strength was supposed to have recovered by now, but he was incapable of burning that body and thinks Kevin's sword must be sharper if he wanted to hurt him, like when he stabbed Hyun 20 years ago. Kevin didn't understand why he couldn't pierce a guy who was nothing more than a puppet. It must be because of the mark of God. That was a special contract granted by the favorite Holy Spirit. That meant that puppet was affiliated with Giselle Lawrence. Jin appears to deliver a downward sword strike, but that couldn't do anything to someone who had the mark of God. Or so they thought. Jin screams that his expression had changed. The Libra Saint laughs worriedly. Someone thinks it was a mistake to bring Jin and tries to expel the Leo Saint. She feels that if it weren't for Kevin, his plan would have been a success. And if he was okay, if his treatment had been good, Director Oliver or not, they shouldn't call him that. They should call him the Lord of the Leo constellation. In the Colosseum, John was angry because no one was doing their job well except Nane Hazard. She cannot understand how he can defeat other saints if he is a spirit. Hugo believes you cannot nullify a saint without their power since the saint's powers could only be nullified by other saints' powers. Today, he doesn't care. He only knew that he had won the battle. But the other subjects think the battle was unfair and should be invalidated. His captain wasn't there, so they couldn't give the verdict. And the only person left from the Leo divine constellation was Nane. She should give the verdict, and Nane's clear verdict is that Jin was the winner. Some cry and others rejoice for betting on Jin. Hassan tells Hugo that it made no sense. It was strange, he destroyed a spirit with his power. Maybe he was the Holy Spirit of the new constellation. Then he takes possession of all the relics in the place and forces the fighters to sign contracts to join his divine constellation. Kevin thinks that if he was the future saint of humanity, the future looked bleak. Hugo thinks the same, but kept saying that Hyun was a god. Did he have any proof, or was it just a rumor? He was just talking nonsense. Hyun thinks Libra knew they had stabbed him in the heart. She knew exactly where it had been. It was as if she had witnessed the scene. Libra must have seen what happened. He wonders if his saint could have intervened, and he receives a mission to baptize his disciple. He tells Hugo to pack his things. They will go see his wife and son. From the Scorpion star cluster, Canada, Beek Hee Hyen 1, that was obvious. Scorpion Saint Haley. Flirtatiously approaching the mirror, a person interrupts him. There was a problem at the Scorpion hospital. The sons of Libra had arrived to attack the sleeping ones, but the son of Sagittarius had stopped them. And as a result of the observations, a 13th star cluster had appeared, with Lee Hee Hyen as the saint. And coincidentally, Sun Hae was the first member of the group, and due to the appearance of a new constellation. It shouldn't be pleasant news for the other people. Everyone would try to keep Jin's group under control. And in the hospital, there were a lot of people looking for the reward for eliminating the first saint. They will keep targeting Sun Hae. They will have to send their forces. Scorpion Hospital, Korea. The 3 brothers were fighting others, since they couldn't mess with their prey. Sun Hae remembers that the other creatures did not respect him. They could not be governed by someone so weak. He had to get out of there. And this person asks if it was Sun Hae. He thinks about running away, and his coin drops. And his father appears, asks for Jian, but he had gone somewhere else. The person asks if Mr. Sagittarius was also present. Sun Hae accuses him to his father. He was a murderer. Since he became a saint, everyone was chasing him. She says she did nothing wrong, but she was lying. She was trying to attack her son from behind, and the god of Sagittarius appears to defend Sun He. But she pulls out a book and writes a phrase, which extinguishes the light of the night and makes the god disappear. She was Yujin, secretary of Scorpio, and she uses a verse from her Bible to make Hugo kneel before her. Hugo remembers that phrase was one that his god Sagittarius sometimes recited. But the Bible couldn't be recited unless it was a god. But no, it was slightly different from the original text. It was like it was an edited Bible. It is explained to us that the Bible was a record of the progress and achievements of each constellation. And the biblical record itself turns into legend and myth. Special beings can read and write those Bibles. That's why those beings no longer existed. In the distant past, the holy spirits along with the vassal gods eliminated all those who possessed scribe abilities. They couldn't turn a blind eye to a saint-level power. That's why the Holy Spirit of Sagittarius wanted to interfere. The secretary laughs, her expression had changed. Now she should get rid of the flies in the hospital. And Jin appears from the air, delivering a kick. He only went to see the hospital. The people who woke up were already in trouble again. He tells Hugo he should hurry. Someone was waiting for him. Meanwhile, in the scribe's dream, during the catastrophe of his town, he was hidden in the rubble, begging to be saved. Waking up on a bed, they had saved him. It was Haley. Reality was waking up again, and Hugo and his wife Hiwoo's embrace finally comes to light. Jin thinks he has a very interesting ability. If he remembers correctly, he must be a scribe. He uses his shadow ability to tear himself away. He will capture the wife to take her hostage, but Jin manages to save her. She was very happy because she was also a fan of Jin. Hugo asks him to let her go. The Scorpio disciple had to catch her. He will use his Bible ability, but he couldn't find a page to be used at that moment by a new throne. And a giant hand captures him. Jin realizes that he tried to open his Bible and will be frank. He will be his scribe in his sanctuary. He tells him to go to H. And Jin accepts. There was nothing he could do, so he was going to kill him, but a red spell prevents it. It was Scorpio's poisonous gland. That meant the Scorpio saint was present. Hylia. She scolds her disciple for being too reckless. She hadn't given him those orders. Jin, from behind her, expresses that it had been a long time. If he didn't want to shout, he just had to answer her questions. And the saint has a panic attack. They ask her if she was okay. She clarifies that yes, she just wanted to walk upside down at that moment. Damn it, Jin couldn't be here. He should be in the Leo sanctuary. She had to calm down. She looks at him and sees him in a very splendid way. Jin catches her. He had to explain everything to her. She enters a state of foolish infatuation. No, that word. It cost me like 5 times to record it, friend. Jin thinks that she seriously hated him so much that she even got sick when he spoke to her. Seeing that he had no other alternative, he asks Junhee that he is going to be baptized, and he enters a completely different universe. He sees Jin and an extremely splendid snake, which pierces him with its power, and he wakes up. He had been correctly baptized with a unique ability. The Scorpio saint asks him if this was his first baptism. Now that he had done that, he could say he was a saint. She congratulates him. Seeing that he woke up, she attacks him with her subordinates, but she doesn't defend herself, thinking it wouldn't hurt her. But seriously speaking, they had to explain to him why his power source was from the unknown civilization. She had deceived everyone, but it was correct. His power was from the unknown civilization, but he still considered himself human and was on his side. Jin asks her to prove it, and he will conduct a simple interrogation of 2 questions. What did you think of Li Jian? And what kind of relationship did you want to have in the future? She is surprised. Those questions weren't a big deal. The answers were colleague and strategic alliance. She doesn't understand why he made her write that, and Jian says he will know the whole truth thanks to his magic relics. If he had that, the true intentions would be revealed. And the revealed message said, I like him, he has charisma, that's why I will betray the unknown civilization. Jin thinks maybe the pen wasn't working. Sun Hale hears that, runs out screaming that Nane should know that Uncle Jin's chastity was in danger. He expresses that he understood that his saint had turned her back on her roots and had chosen the human side. All of that was because of him, because she wanted to, and the saint interrupts him and asks him to stop. Jin asks her about the civilization's weapons and the dagger that stabbed him. She explains that weapon possessed the power of the monarch. Monarch means the highest rank of a creature from the unknown civilization. Even he couldn't resist such a weapon, and when she saw them, she sealed them immediately. Cappy asks what kind of separate civilization. They had eradicated the red eye 20 years ago, but she says that unfortunately that calamity was not the boss. There were at least 3 red eyes, and they were much stronger than the one they had seen. And well, people, with that great intrigue that there are more powerful creatures that Lijin must face. Now that he remembered, the administrator of the Devil's Tower had said something similar. Hugo couldn't believe it. Had he perhaps heard correctly? Were there 3 more of those big-eyed ones? The protagonist didn't care, because the handsome one. Besides, he shouldn't be afraid. No one could block his way. Of course it wouldn't be easy, because they needed to become stronger. For that reason, they needed that thing. He got angry. What was she saying? He was an idiot, since there was no way his master would. And she hesitated, asking if he needed anything else. And so he fell into the abyss of betrayal. Then the next day, Aijun could finally have coffee in the morning after a long time, believing that no matter how busy he was, he always had to make time for himself. Meanwhile, behind him, they cursed at him over and over again. Did he have no feelings? Shouting at him why he had to suffer like that, the protagonist just laughed. His master had sold him for free. Now he had to work hard to look good to his boss. Crying, he felt he would make them pay, since he would regret trusting Afiyuko's Bible to him, completing the synchronization, counting page 5, deserting as Afiyuko's servant, changing the story to subjugate that man. Laughing at his achievement, he shouted for him to get to his feet right now, but they hit him. What the hell was he doing? Was he crazy? Accusing him that his plans had clearly failed. He had to look closely at that Bible. He didn't understand. She had changed that verse because it looked weird, writing that he would continue to be her servant until her master wanted him. Asking if he had done something wrong. Then it is told that the Libra constellation is number 1, with more than 2 million members, believing that the current Libra will not be an easy opponent for him. Furthermore, Giselle, the stellar lady of Libra, is not just a substitute for the Holy Spirit. She is so close to the Spirit that she is considered an alter ego of the Holy Spirit. Dealing with Giselle is practically the same as dealing with the spirit of Libra. And for him to be able to take care of the Holy Spirits and the monarchs of the unknown civilizations, he desperately needs the existence of a scribe to improve his achievements, authority, and even power. Telling the boy that she also had that ability and had hired him to have 2 scribes on her side, managing to overcome the trials. All his restrictions had been unlocked. Then, at the headquarters of the Libra constellation, in the Chinpayungung Palace, they told him that Scorpio had met with Legion. She knew it, since that woman had always had feelings for that man, but she was surprised that it lasted more than 20 years. It was a very pure love, so she didn't care if more joined him. They were all idiots, since they were simply on another level. Soon they would destroy them. And that's why for the moment they had to put things in their favor. They had to take his scribe away, no matter what happened. Meanwhile, near a Scorpion construction site, Hugo asked if it was true that his wife would join his squad, accusing him of how he was doing that. Saints always went for scribes. Besides, why did they have to be from their constellation? The protagonist told him that none of the 12 constellations provided him energy, so only his constellation remained. Hugo complained. Hallie also agreed, and so the protagonist appeared with his super contract. Super upgraded for his super wife. Hugo had no choice but to agree. She also talked about her daughter and the condition of her arm. The curse was planted. He had compressed it as much as he could, but it had a limit. It might be difficult to suppress it for much longer. The protagonist did not know this, asking for more information about it. Then she stated that she had resolved everything, asking if she could organize the next section. Eugen told him to do whatever he wanted, remembering that the protagonist hit him with that mandatory feather, which wouldn't let him act against him, cursing him and throwing Hyun's feather. But it clashed and returned to him, hitting him several times for abandoning her. At that moment, someone was watching them, cursing because his mother ordered him to come, but why would she ask him to do something like that? However, he wanted to think positively. If he failed, they wouldn't give him the blood mist. He had to regain his mother's trust. The target was the scribe. It was definitely that guy, but the woman seemed to be one too. She looked much weaker, so he would go for her. As someone approached, he thought he would end it once and for all. And so the door was knocked down. It was Kevin, arriving while shouting how he dared to leave him in the Leo sanctuary. He would never forgive him. They were surprised, asking why the Virgo saint was there. The protagonist asked him why he made a scene every time he appeared. He complained, but noticed Scorpio. After arguing, they noticed the blonde one, concluding that no one invited him. Hugo got angry. What was that bastard doing there? He was the son of Libra. He wondered what had just happened and was hit, thinking that a long time had passed. It seemed that he had been the one who caused tears to his friends and nephews. He was completely finished. Hugo shouted at him if he wanted to mess with his family again. Haley believed it was obvious. He was there after learning about the existence of his scribe. That's what his mother had said, right? Kevin was also furious. Was that the son of Libra, the one who called the toads to destroy his sanctuary? The protagonist liked these thoughts, asking if he should blow his head off. He knew that if this continued, he would die, so he shouted the word constellation. He had to move him to the hiding place. Seeing Aijun pull back a little, he lit up. It had worked. Now he could hear. But he didn't understand why that subject was laughing. Upon seeing his complaints that he had left, the protagonist calmed them down. He had let him go on purpose. It was a pity to finish him off too quickly. Then in Honolulu, Hawaii, at Libra's luxury property complex, the older brother cursed. It was embarrassing that he recovered that way, but they would see. He would tear off their limbs and make them crawl. At that very moment, his brother shouted for him to get out of the way, crashing into him. Then they shouted at him if they had captured him trying to get rid of the scribe. He was an idiot. He didn't do anything right, asking what they would tell their mother now. He always had to clean up the messes he made. For now, he had to follow him, taking him to a closet with rocks. He explained that he would use something equivalent to that. Each of those jewels were cores that could not be captured, something made to grind the ashes from the attack of the Devil's Tower. They were going to use them to cause catastrophic calamities. He had to control himself. Everything would be fine, since they had the Libra rosary. They just had to hold it and see it with their own eyes. Alerts appeared. Libra has already used the equivalent exchange. He should have offered him a core as tribute. Upon exchanging it, they would be given a catastrophe that no one could handle, emitting enormous yellow energy. But an error appeared. The energy now turned light blue. They didn't understand who the hell they had summoned. The rosary could not control him. The blonde believed he remembered something from before, crouching down. And his brother was hit on the head. He laughed. He wouldn't do it again. The protagonist then assumes they were hiding there, and by the way, he had captured his escaped vassal. The bird shouted that the catastrophic existence had appeared. They had succeeded. Everyone was going to die. And since he was already there, he asked what he wanted to talk about with him. This one asked him to wait a bit. He admitted it. He was wrong. He would confess what he had done. He would go to the sacred sanctuary. And he would apologize. Jin laughed. He still didn't know what the real problem was. At that moment, his sword fell, explaining that they were forgetting one of the most important things. He had to pay for everything he had done. The child became fearful, believing he was really going to die. What should he do? He had to do something. Stumbling upon his brother's rosary of balance, this one woke up, asking about the object. Shinwo took it, asking for forgiveness, but now that he thought about it, he was right. He was useless, activating the equivalent exchange, but the exchange wouldn't be very useful to him. That's why they would take his brother's body, obtaining the reward for his title, transforming him into a catastrophe. And so his brother slowly began to transform because of the object. The protagonist laughed. It was quite a show. His younger brother sacrificed his older brother, and a Holy Spirit takes him as an attribute. He didn't know they were like that. It was a completely different family from the one he knew. Stepping firmly, deploying his sanctuary, the child couldn't believe what he saw. Also, his connection with Libra was lost. They were in the palace of Afaku's sanctuary, saying that their sanctuary grew as a reward for overcoming the trials. Libra's power could no longer be used there. Now his brother would die in ashes due to the null connection. It seemed his brother was right. He was completely useless. In the sanctuary, Jin could activate Sagittarius, piercing eye, asking if he had any last words to say. For example, something before dying, some little confession. He could even write his will. The child only cursed over and over. What the hell was he doing? How could he torture him so persistently? Was it because of that damned blood mist? Was he young? Everyone made mistakes, often when they were young. The mist in Europe, the attack in the hospital, all of that were orders from above. Besides, he had the mist anyway. All the dead had come back to life. What was the problem? Everything was resolved. Everything was already over. He should leave him alone. Besides, didn't he know who he was? He is the son of Giselle Lawrence, the saint of, does he think his mother would stay like this if he touched him? And looking at him, he cursed him. Had he perhaps fallen asleep? The protagonist thought it was hard to keep his eyes open with such a boring speech. Did he not have anyone to talk to? But at least the others had listened very attentively, as not only he was present in that boring conversation. Jian, upon hearing his doubts, explains that literally what he just said had been broadcast to the whole world. He had been preparing so that everyone everywhere could hear him. More or less 8 billion people, considering that Sagittarius ability, piercing eye, was a kind of clairvoyant ability, capable of transmitting messages. In the Libra sanctuary, they demanded that they intercept the message and find Jin's location. But this was impossible. No one could do anything. Meanwhile, in the city, everyone shouted Libra's name. He had to give explanations. Had she gone crazy? She was a damn woman. If it weren't for Jin, thousands would have died, shouting for revenge on Libra. In the distance, someone felt that it was an abnormal situation, asking if there wasn't a hole through which to escape, asking his brother for forgiveness while he heard the shouts of hatred from the others. Jin congratulated him, asking how it felt to be a world-class assassin. He had given him the chance to apologize, but he had only complained. He had lost the last chance for forgiveness toward that world. The child just cried. Was he going to die like this? They should help him. In the sanctuary, they reported on Libra's disgrace and the increase in Fuko citizens. They reported this to their lady. They had to deploy their elite groups. She remained silent and turned on her eye. Hyun asked her to grit her teeth tightly. However, someone stopped him. It was enough. He couldn't stand idly by. Hyun felt that he had finally arrived there. Was there a lot of traffic to arrive so late? She believed she won this time. She never thought he would do something this crazy. Hyun denied it. Not as crazy as destroying an entire city. Upon hearing the demand to return his son, he denied it. He would be benevolent. He had to choose an option. Either reveal all the atrocities he had committed and pay for them, or fight him. Besides, he had to tell her who stabbed him in that damn tower. She felt it was absurd. Why should she follow that stupid suggestion? Hyun imagined that response, cutting off his son's head. She accused him of what he was doing. Hyun remained serene, believing that wasn't all. She didn't understand him. Had he resurrected him? He wondered what was happening. And now his arm was being cut off. Then they made several cuts on him and tore off his head again. Upon hearing her complaints, he calmed her down. Didn't she see it? Before it was too boring. It wasn't fair for his victims to die quickly. So now he would make them suffer as many times as the deaths on that day, cutting her again once. And again. That was the salvation he needed. He was her savior. In every death, he only begged for mercy. This was happening while everyone watched them through the portals. Those from his temple could not stand watching what was happening. It was constant suffering for one of his brothers. And so hours passed. Libra screamed at him about how long he was going to test her patience. At that very moment of fury, a portal opened above her. A gigantic beast appeared in front of her. Looking closely at it, blood came from her lips out of rage. Jin laughed. It seemed like she was angry. But why was she standing still doing nothing? Her eldest son had returned. She should hug him and tell him I love you. She cursed at him. She would definitely pay the price for provoking her. Jin squeezed the bird. Since that was not a provocation, that was just a response to the actions he had taken so far. Anything that stood in his way would end up like this, whether it be the beings chosen by the constellations, or unknown civilizations, even if it was a holy spirit, hitting his bird, promising to see each other very soon. Until then, he had to clean his neck for his arrival, shouting his name. Those present asked him if he was okay, but she emanated a monstrous power that reverberated throughout the place, shouting for Lijin's name. She would kill him and all his friends for entering her territory. Resonating throughout the city, they asked the boy if he had woken up yet. For a moment he felt pity for him, but now he would die. However, he asked how many times he had cut him. It seemed he had lost count. If so, they will repeat everything again. If before 2.000 people had died in the hospital, then in the other place, 3.000 had died. And they asked him to shut up. How was he supposed to calculate if he kept crying? But he gave up. He would kill him 10.000 more times. Then in Liu Stadium, they proclaimed champion Chinzhou Ha as the dazzling winner. She had knocked out her opponents again in an instant. These three felt that it was something strange. Originally, she was indifferent to victory in the arena, but now she was very interested in winning. She behaved like this since Li Ji declared war on Libra. They also felt it was the first time they had seen someone tortured so cruelly, but it had been awesome. While on stage, they filled her with questions and praise, asking her to answer something. She had made the decision. She made the decision to leave the constellation of Leo. She also wanted to join Legion's group. She couldn't stand it anymore. In the hospital, they tried to change the channel, but their leader had already fainted, shouting for him to wake up. Amidst their complaints, the news also reported on the lies and catastrophes Libra had committed. They asked for calm. Nothing had been confirmed. Libra's position had not yet been expressed. Besides, she could devise a strategy based on considerations to steal his prestige. He got angry. What was he talking about? If she wasn't guilty, she shouldn't remain silent about such a big incident. Most likely, she was looking for some excuse to cover up the situation. Haley felt that the media always exaggerated things. She felt, if she pulled her strings, it would be a piece of cake. Moving her influences, starting to review the pros and cons of the media situation, Hugo just asked them to trust Hyun. Kevin asked about him and why he wasn't showing up. Hugo believed he must be busy elsewhere. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, at Libra's old hideout, a machine was destroying the buildings. Hyun nodded. They were doing a good job. The demolition was almost finished. He could already see his next construction. The income was also already good because he had taken everything, and his new construction would be for his suite. Home, it was his gift for everything he had done, and he wondered if his own gift had reached its destination. Libra, for her part, was completely angry. How dare he send her something like that? He had scorned her until the end. Why was he so obsessed with revenge? Asking if they had convinced Virgo, but they denied it. That guy was now on Hyun's side. She didn't understand him. That's why they had to gather all forces under her command. She couldn't stand still now that all that was happening. This was an all-out war. They had to contact all branches, allied constellations from all over the world. They had to eliminate Hyun at all costs. They obeyed, they had to run. They had to announce that the war had begun. And when she was alone, she asked him to come out. Her battle general reported that he had gathered the troops of the unknown civilization. They were all prepared for her order. She understood, thanking him for his work, wielding a sword, and in front of her was a world with yellow threads, which turned into a dusty red. With her right hand, she pulled that red towards the world, while lightning appeared in the Pacific Ocean. It was the territory of the unknown civilization, Black Zone, from which a dragon appeared, and behind it thousands and thousands of beasts, monsters, skeletons, demon armies appeared, who watched as a huge holy hand appeared. It moved into the ocean. Libra unleashed her evil power. She had summoned them. They must erase and murder Legion and all his damned allies. It was an order, shouting at the protagonist that she would make him feel overwhelming despair. A counter appeared, 65 hours before the invasion. Then the island of Hawaii and Afiyuko's old palace, Afiyuko's new palace, and Taer, Hesley appeared. Kevin and his family. Kevin complained about what they were doing in that place, and when he looked up, they were astonished, asking how he had done all that so quickly. He welcomed them. It was Iaso, an ex-Aquarius ex-Libra, now called Disinfectant. He had been kidnapped by Libra, and now Jin took her in as a prisoner. In her arms, she held the egg that Jin entrusted to her, since she is about health and recovery. Kevin assumed he established his home there. Hesley became alarmed. He couldn't stay behind, ordering his vassal to bring all his forces to that place. They had to make their presence known. Now she asked them to cross that door. In it, a type of snake was spewing magma. Hugo asked what that was, realizing it was a steel factory, amazed by his madness. Besides, it was very hot there. In it, they recognized Sagittarius, his lord's slave. Their god was waiting for them, showing us that they loved their work as blacksmiths, thus entering another room where hammer blows were heard, introducing themselves while hazily. Far away, she was totally in love. Hyun introduced himself sexily, making the women present blush. After that scandal, Kevin left because it was very hot. They tried to revive Scorpion. Hyun recounted that he had built all that because of his new ability, the workshop creation ability. He was totally motivated, saying he would stay there since. In that workshop, he would create countless sacred relics. No matter how motivated he was, he still had many things to do, and creating everything would be done to gain an advantage in the war. At that moment, he was making a weapon for Yuha, then for Zonghai, and another for Hiwo. They were excited, except Hugo because he wasn't named. Hyun asked him to give it to him. Upon hearing his doubts, he asked for his sanctuary since it was already destroyed. Just then, thunderous blows sounded in the place. Hyun shouted that Heisley had disappeared. Were they attacking his base? Upon going out, enormous boxes had arrived. She, trembling, recounted that his sanctuary was like his home. Therefore, it needed an inauguration. She had to perceive that as a gift, feeling proud because it was completely natural, counting that there was food there. On that side, there was money. In the other, sacred objects, materials, and many, many more things. Hugo felt he was trying too hard, wishing her luck with her, and he was amazed. She hadn't asked for that, handing letters to Jian. Hugo supposes it was a letter from an enthusiast. Outside, they were saying resumes. The redhead expressed to him what Nane had done yesterday, and all the fuss she caused, assuming that was why. Meanwhile, in the United States, at Leo's headquarters, he was extremely angry. Why had she said that? It was enough for her just to leave, but now many people were leaving his side because of her fault. But he realized she knew it, asking if she could leave. He asked her if she was sure about leaving that place because of his arm. She remembered that fateful day, 10 years ago. She was in Scorpion's hospital next to her brother. At one point, she heard a noise, asking if it was her father, moving forward to look for him. As she moved forward, she saw a door. Approaching it, someone greeted her. She must be Nane. Nane recognized that woman as Libra's saint. She wanted to talk a bit in another place. Then she said she really felt sorry about her mother. Upon seeing that smile, she thanked her. Now she understood why Hugo always boasted about his children, even though she had been through a lot. She remained very mature. She was always worried about her children, wanting them to behave like her. Even now they had got into trouble, which is why they were locked in their rooms. Stating that raising children was very difficult, she needed to listen carefully. She liked children like her, wondering how good it would be if she were his daughter. Nane didn't understand her, and after a silence, she just smiled. It was just a joke, she shouldn't be scared. Apologizing for being rude, summoning some reddish earrings. She must take that. They were a gift to commemorate their reunion. Upon hearing her doubts, she asked her to take them. They were especially for her, insisting once. And once more. Hugo walked around nearby, recognizing Libra's voice. Upon seeing that it was his daughter receiving earrings, he got scared. Nane saw him happy as they fell into her hands, which unleashed a red fury. Hugo shouted not to do it, and a loud noise appeared in the place. An explosion was seen in the distance. There was someone in the crowd. Hugo screamed for his daughter. She only screamed in pain. It was unbearable. He ignited himself with fire to help his daughter, but Libra laughed, and so Hugo was repelled, thrown toward the wall, immediately realizing that his current strength was not enough. Libra laughed. Did he think he was still a saint? Hearing his complaints, she asked him to calm down. He had already failed as a husband, now he would fail as a father. Hearing her screams, he felt those words were very different from what she had said before. Although his daughter was incredible, he never thought she would resist the evil god's energy for so long. She still resisted despite the pain, but it was clear she wouldn't last long. It seemed he had no other way to save his daughter, unless she became his property, and she asked for silence. This was a hospital, asking him to come under her command. He had to let go of the attachment to the deceased Elijah. He knew her worth. If he followed her, she would reward him and bring back his rank. It was a tempting offer, wasn't it? Now he had to make his choice. Either abandon his daughter or come with her. Just then, Nane grabbed his foot, shouting not to bother her father. She laughed sarcastically. She was a cutie. She couldn't believe she was still conscious. But she had told her before, she liked obedient children, so for this hour she had to follow her order. Invoking Libra's sacrifice, Hugo lunged at her, asking her to stop, yet both felt a presence. A loud noise appeared in the place. Leo's ability, Victorious Battlefield, had appeared. Believing that he had seen this girl long before for her to be his disciple, Stephen Marker had appeared, who thought he had done something horrible to a little girl. But she had resisted, believing she could be someone of the highest level if she was in his constellation. Someone comparable to a holy spirit, believing she would fit very well in his constellation of beasts. Libra shouted at him not to interfere, but she silenced her. She had said she would do everything necessary to increase her power. She had created her own evil spirit. She knew very well why she was trying to stop her. But if she was so determined, she should use that evil ability to see if she could take Nane. Lidra accepted the challenge. Outside, ambulances appeared. Screams of people looking for Mr. Stephen could be heard. He thought there was a large crowd. He was a man of fights. He liked the crowd, but she would continue like this. They saw her. She stopped, exploding the power she held in her hand, breaking part of the building. Believing that for now, she would not worsen the situation any further. But one day, she would pay for this. He laughed, threatening her to come whenever she wanted, as he would soon surpass even Hyun. She cursed, calling him just a stupid animal, and disappeared from the place. Stephen felt it had been refreshing, he shouldn't thank her. Upon hearing that they were bringing him around, he only came to see their faces before leaving the country. Meanwhile, he also complained about giving audiences, public apologies, and such things. She had to go with him so she wouldn't suffer any more for now. He knew Hyun, could he help him get over it? Hugo thanked him, but no, for now, he had to free his daughter, but he couldn't. If he freed her from the evil spirit, it would be unleashed. His daughter would once again become Libra's target. To put it bluntly, he asked if he could even protect his own daughter in that state. The reality is that in that state, she wouldn't even be called Sagittarius. The spirit that attacked his daughter had animal characteristics. His group specialized in that. Maybe it wasn't possible to eliminate it, but they could suppress it so it wouldn't become savage. Therefore, he would take her with him, undoing the barrier. And indeed, the evil spirit was suppressed by Leo's power. He failed to recruit him, but he would take his daughter, who had great potential. Upon hearing why he saved him, he remembered the past of why he couldn't protect Jin, feeling his conscience weighed heavily. Only that moment, when he defended him, came to mind. Returning to the present, Nanae would always be grateful for what he had done in his past. But her growth had stopped. If she wanted to help her uncle, she had to become stronger. Stephen nodded. He had done his best for the last 10 years, starting to speak words of sadness, asking that even if he left, she must take care of herself. Nanae didn't believe him. He was crying, and just as he was about to speak, they interrupted him, yelling at him to leave already. He had heard everything, and he never took that group seriously. He had to get out. Stephen shouted at him what he was doing. He was already convincing her to stay. Nanae couldn't believe it, had he used fake tears. And so they started fighting over that girl, again and again, with Stephen asking everyone to leave his constellation. The bald one understood. That was no longer a problem. Upon hearing him say to calm down, he denied it. He was always ridiculously ignorant about his group members. How could he call himself a person, expelling an enormous amount of energy? Stephen asked if that was really Libra's energy. What the hell had he done? He laughed. Now he really felt good. He had become much stronger than before. With that power, he would fix the discipline of the constellations. Stephen shouted at him to stop. What was he doing? But in that small instant, Leo's arm was cut off. Steve cursed. His body had been destroyed in a single blow, shouting why he had betrayed him. He denied it. That wasn't a betrayal. If he had been a good administrator, he never would have done something like that. He was just trying to rebuild his constellation, saying that the logic of Leo's power was power, but he had designated Nanae as Vice Lord, an S-rank person, even though he was a double S person. He surpassed that girl in everything. Why the hell had he chosen her? Such a decision was not a decision by force. But now it didn't matter. Legion could defeat him easily. He was so focused on that idiot that he neglected his constellation. He even had to eliminate the previous Celestial Lord to become the Celestial Lord. Leo didn't understand. He couldn't believe the master had passed away. He laughed. It was like that, or because he believed his predecessor died isolated, without receiving any support. He was the one commanding and leading the troops at that moment. At that instant, Lana jumped, grabbing his head, slamming him against the wall. He thought it was exciting. That was the ability Stephen Marker had created with Legion. It seemed like Stephen had passed that ability to him, but that ability was too weak to avenge his master. To properly crush his opponent, he had to do something like that. The 4 floors of the building had been pierced. Those present recognized her as their Vice Lord, asking if she was okay, and laughter was heard upstairs, asking him to get up quickly and counterattack, shouting that he was no longer an opponent for him. If he didn't want to die, he had to unleash the beast in his arm and fight with it. If he didn't, she would crush him completely. Meanwhile, in the creation workshop, Hyun felt he was ready. It was quite noisy, but it was almost time. From now on, he would give her a task to complete as secretary, since his daughter seemed to need help. In this, he believed that this place was good for dying. Nanae asked him if he had done all that just to get the position of Celestial Lord. He supposes he should be excited because he got a little stronger. He didn't understand. A little. Didn't you see that he ripped Stephen's arm off with one blow? His power was that of a saint. He would be the strongest man. Nane asked the strongest. What had he achieved besides capturing the master, cutting off Steven's arm in a surprise attack? He didn't even know how to get rid of her, what rank she was. He wasn't the strongest by a long shot. He was just Leo's sub-captain, who couldn't even understand his place, so he would be punished right there. He got angry, activating the golden beast ability, turning into a panther. Nane, at an impressive speed, managed to land a kick on him, sending him flying. But before he fell, she accelerated even more, fists destroying. But in the last attack, she was caught and sent crashing to the ground. No matter how much she fought, she was useless. This was her end. Her lady told her to try to capture her, but she didn't want to do that anymore, as she couldn't even manage her right arm. Nane was angry with herself, since she couldn't defeat a person like Oliver, and she couldn't contact her uncle either, nor that person. He didn't understand what she was babbling about. She had to face her destiny. Throwing a whole train at her, she ignited herself again, thinking she never wanted to be defenseless again. She didn't want to lose like she did back then. Definitely this time she would win. She would be in the same place as her Uncle Jin. She would give everything to achieve it. She liked that personality and a voice very much, recognizing her uncle's voice. But the train was already too close. However, something happened, and looking ahead, she wondered if that was a spear. Before, they proclaimed that the serpent's armament must choose its master and follow him no matter what. This should be until the end of her master's life, and since it was completed, she asked what to do now. Leo asked her to throw it as high as possible. She understood. The boy didn't understand what kind of throwing this was, and the spear exploded in speed, going from one side to the other. Leo felt it had worked well. Now the spear had found its own path. Upstairs, Stephen cursed for being humiliated like that, and an attack appeared next to this attack that managed to stop the collision between Nane and the train. She was amazed by that weapon. It was a spear. Afyuku welcomed her indomitable fighting spirit. Now she needed to validate her worth to join Afyuku. She accepted the mission smiling, and an immense power appeared. He felt that one weapon didn't change the fight at all. He was going to finish her right now. Lunging at her, Nane used the Burning Lotus ability. He shouted at her that he had already told her that her power was useless against him, but the beam was maximized by Afyuku, shouting that it was now their turn to attack. Lotus disaster. Stephen asked what was happening downstairs. At that moment, Nane's power broke every movement. It was an enormous power. Half the city underground had been destroyed. He had to see for himself what had happened, but when he got downstairs, the first thing he saw was Oliver. He was sure he would win, but he was defeated by only an E-class. Stephen asked him to realize he shouldn't underestimate that girl. For her, the word strongest was not a meaning, but a purpose. It wasn't talent, it wasn't luck, it was only sacrifice. But looking down, he didn't know she had so much power, and he didn't reach her side. Oliver felt he was lucky. Both were present now, but Stephen just shouted at him what was happening, interrupting Oliver once. And again, because he felt Hyun's energy, starting to argue that he had already changed before speaking, concentrating only on them. Oliver shouted that they were bastards, they needed to listen carefully. Seeing their mockery, he felt that this was not his end. It was just the beginning. They had no idea what Libra really was. Besides, their headquarters had been destroyed. Did they understand what that meant? The barrier there, the one protecting Leo, had been disabled. Destruction would soon arrive there. Stephen, seeing that energy, wondered if he planned to do something else. Was he summoning a disaster? And at that instant, the world paralyzed. A calamity had appeared. It had eyes as red as crimson. Stephen didn't understand. That damned thing should have died in the demonic tower. They had to run. It was a calamity. It was sucking in a large amount of air and releasing its power. People ran desperately, but Stephen didn't, even leaving Nane astonished. While in Afyuko's sanctuary, Jin felt something uneasy, believing he had a bad premonition. In the news, alerts were appearing. Comedies had appeared in the corners of the world. The confirmed regions were the United States, the European Union, and Korea. They were on red alert. The appearance of one of them was very similar to that of the Crimson Eye that caused the great commotion last time. In it, the constellations had spoken. The calamities would stop, and everything would be released by Libra. They understood it. It seemed they wanted to clear their name, but they never thought it would be with the Crimson Eye. Hugo didn't understand how that had happened, wondering if he hadn't defeated it. Even the other saints had come out with their eyes. She recounted that there was a dispute over the ownership of the body. After a dispute, it was decided that the head would be locked in the sea at Libra's suggestion. Jin understood it. It was that damned thing. He had to go kill the Crimson Eyes. He also wanted to check if this was the one he hunted before or another one. Calling Scorpion, asking her to please establish security in her sanctuary in case of enemies. Barriers, formations, and traps. Those were her specialties. She was the only one he could entrust that to. She only thought that he was very close. Seeing that smile, she smiled lovingly. He had to leave it to her. She would do it for him, even if it meant removing her own pillars from her own sanctuary. Her general asked her to calm down, but she paid him no mind, since Li Jian told her that she was the only one. In her mind, Jian almost asked her to live in the same place. The protagonist asked Hugo to go to Korea immediately. He calmed him down about Nane. She still had energy, he would take good care of her. So he shouldn't worry, he should go to Korea. Because if Libra did something to Korea, it would be difficult to handle the situation with just a group of kids. Meanwhile, in Seoul, Korea, monsters were being attacked, but the archers cursed there were too many. How had they crossed the lines so easily? And they shouted that more had appeared. The monsters were devastating everything. They were almost infinite. However, far away an explosion appeared, the beasts noticed, and they flew away. Someone couldn't believe they were having trouble with such pathetic types. It was obvious they were from the Archer constellation. He was the saint of Taurus, Ivan Kruger, and he asked where the idiot Hugo had gone. He thanked him for his help. If he had anything to tell his lord, he would deliver his message. He denied it. He would wait quietly, but they needed to know something. He truly hated having his way blocked, slamming one of them into the wall. He explained that he would be fine. He shouldn't worry. He was still angry. He knew he should have assisted there for something, as his relationship with Sagittarius was not good at all. Seeing that aura, he realized how strong he was, asking him to better join him. Upon hearing his denial, he didn't know how the bastard Hugo could control his forces so well. But it didn't matter, as Hydra had told him he could destroy everything, so he would have some fun. In Afiyuko, Hugo asked her to contact him if anything happened, but she was calm, as she would be with Jin. And so Hugo said goodbye. The protagonist would soon go with him, after defeating the Crimson Leo. Also, his weapon was about to be finished, and so when he left, he believed they couldn't leave yet. First, they had to catch the rats approaching their sanctuary. Seeing that the red servant had left, they must advance. That was the signal. Everyone had to target that man named Jin. They had to prepare for battle. They were ghost knights from the unknown civilization. Black level. In this, Scorpion had finished. She had even brought her relic. Now they would see if those fools would pass. The boy didn't understand how he had filled the place with so many totems, believing that his constellation would now crumble. The general asked her to follow him silently. The princess had already made a decision. The boy understood and heard a crunching sound. Scorpion's main totem began to scream and then broke, and this happened with many. Scorpion explained that there were very close enemies, powerful enough to break the statues, and a voice resonated throughout the place, believing they were careless, asking for the name of the master of the place. Upon seeing that they interrupted his sentence, he exploded them with an attack. The general asked them if they were okay. They had to be careful with those guys. Scorpion knew it, they were strong. Could they be the army of the unknown civilization? They believed that if that man didn't appear, they had to kill those present, lunging towards them. The general's sting attacked, however it was completely cut by the skeleton. He didn't understand how he had destroyed a domestic god with just one blow. Scorpion could only place his hand in front of him, but he felt it was too simple an attack. Turning, and with the inertia of his strength, he hit him with his scorpion whip. Asking how he dared to touch that land with his dirty feet, Jin shouted, "That's how you talk." And thousands of attacks appeared behind her. These hundreds of arrows pierced the athletes, except for the strongest ones. Jin had heard sounds of rats, but he never thought the rats would be this big. Rebuke them for what they were doing there. The captain recognized him as the subject they were looking for, although he was too young to call him a saint. It was a little disappointing. Jin cursed, what the hell were they saying? Since when did he have to live up to his expectations? They simply had to answer one question. Who were they? He silenced him. How dare you speak to my captain that way? He had to close her up, but an attack hit him. Jin was furious. How dare he interrupt him? The captain, seeing that, supposed he was strong. which is why Libra had called them, asking for his name. Upon hearing his name, he recognized him as the master of the serpent, apologizing for underestimating him. They were the vanguard knights of the army of the unknown civilization. They were there to annihilate the human race that followed the demon god's traitors. If he interfered against them, they would destroy them, shouting at their soldiers to attack at once. They must advance for the monarch. Jin still felt they were underestimating him. Annihilate, destroy. Was he joking? It seemed he had to teach them a lesson, summoning his celestial sword. It appeared at great speed, breaking a significant number of beasts. The captain attacked Jin, but was surprised because Jin took his weapon, believing that spear was too weak, slamming him against the ground. The others entered revenge mode, but Jin dodged at an impressive speed. They were too slow for him, and all their weapons had been stopped. In the same place, now they couldn't break free. The protagonist now, while taking out his mace, started smashing everywhere, increasing its size, shouting that they were useless, they were no match for him. The sub-general cursed, his troops had been killed in an instant, and an explosion was shown to us. She shouted at Jin that he had released all his allies, as he had said. These ones were enraged. How dare they enter their lord's sanctuary? They were going to eliminate them all. Jin believed he had arrived just in time. Now he could personally take care of the captain. He got angry, shouting that he would cut him down with his spear, dragging enormous power. It headed toward Jin, but was cut in two. However, another attack appeared from above, surprising the skeleton by blocking it. Jin shouted at him to use a bit more strength, while kicking the horse. And then he attacked him again, making the captain jump off him, generating his rage, shouting to see if he could block that new attack. He would eliminate him and his subordinates in a single second. Who was still charging his strength, throwing his sword, making him lose balance, changing the direction of his attack. His allies cursed. The captain was in trouble, but at least they hadn't hit him. But something caught him. It was those damned insects. They were pulling his whip. He thought they were idiots. They had shortened the distance between them, clearly seeking his death. But Scorpion said it was her turn. And so Hyun pierced the army captain with his sword, believing he was too loud to be dead, slamming him against the ground, feeling that this way was much better. The other soldiers had been subdued by his subordinates. The captain couldn't believe his knights had been defeated so easily. Hyun only laughed. Even he had helped them. He was a great captain. In that moment of desperation, his eye lit up, explaining that if he died, he would at least take him with him. They had to go to hell together, believing that no matter how strong he was, if he fell from the stratosphere, he would never survive. John doesn't know what he had prepared, but he didn't like that position. Changing places, positioning himself above him, feeling that he had always wanted to surf, at least once in his life. And he asked when they were going to fall. Meanwhile, nearby, at Leo's headquarters in Washington, D.C., the calamity had destroyed the place. Nane thought she was going to die, and Stephen, all wounded, asked if they were hurt. Falling to the floor, he had managed to stop the attack, although now he couldn't eat chips with his own hands. Besides, he cursed. That thing was moving, they had to stop it. The others from his cult arrived, believing that after all, Leo's spirit still burned. But they trusted Stephen, feeling that if he had defeated it before, they could do it now. Nane calmed them down. That couldn't be. That thing was stronger than before. Besides, they had to save the other citizens, asking them to organize for the battle. And the rescue. They understood. Stephen thanked her, but she had only returned the favor from before. Also, now with his new mission, he had to defeat that thing, asking her if she was going to help him. He could show her the ability from the past that defeated that monster. He denied it. She should already know. He didn't defeat that thing in the past. It was Legion. But he wasn't there for the moment. So he had no choice but to attack. It was his moment. He would use the descendant of his divine god. The risk didn't matter, because if he didn't do it, the citizens would be in danger. He had already made the decision. It was his chance to compensate for his shameful behavior 20 years ago. Starting to emit an extraordinary light, shouting that this time he would not leave the place like back then, asking Nane to cover him while his god descended. The calamity realized the power, attacking with fury. In that, the skeleton screamed, and Jin believed they had finally landed, hitting him to gain momentum, and so sliding on the beast to lighten the fall. Stephen screamed, "What the hell was that?" and Jin fell on him, saying that he had traveled a lot during that fall. Upon recognizing the voice, he was asked what he was doing there, and also why that guy was on the floor, assuming that skull had brought him to Washington, D.C. The skeleton laughed. It was all over. It made no sense to defeat it. Even he couldn't handle the crimson monster. His death was sealed. Hyun laughed. Was it the same one as before? Asking if he remembered him. Then they recounted that 20 years ago the ruler of the Demon Tower suddenly appeared. The biggest disaster had appeared and was defeated by Lijin. But in the present he felt it was something very different. Also, his greeting was a bit rude. It had been a long time since they saw each other. He should greet him properly, starting to jump between buildings at full speed. The beast made such a large blow that it split the building in two, but the protagonist kept dodging. Feeling that something was strange, he was stupider than before, using Ophiuchus's eye, realizing that the head was the original one. But his body was completely new. This body was covered by Libra's energy. Meanwhile, in Libra's sanctuary, she didn't care if Jin fought the calamity. That was just a puppet. Although she worried because that idiot managed to defeat the fog recently, even with borrowed power. In that, they had something to report to her. They had just confirmed that Hugo was in Korea and was with Ivan. They also told her about the army that had been destroyed. She asked about Kali, but they apologized, but she hadn't answered her call. She felt they still didn't want to listen to her, but they couldn't waste more time. So she would go to war to give orders to the troops. The objective was Korea and the Demon Tower. Meanwhile in Seoul, Korea, Hugo arrived. Ivan felt he finally appeared. Hugo demanded to know why he was there and why he had laid his hands on his subordinates. He was there for the Demon Tower. The Crimson Eye had appeared, and he was there to investigate it. Also, he had taught his subordinates a lesson because they lacked discipline. Hugo cursed at him. He was still an idiot. Also, if he was there to investigate the tower, why hadn't he entered? Was he perhaps afraid to enter, just like 20 years ago? And Ivan stood up, mocking him because he seemed confident after recovering a bit of his strength. But even if he recovered all his strength, he was an idiot without a relic. Did he not remember that he broke it? He supposed that this time it was his turn to crush him, breaking his cigar, using Taurus's ability. His subordinates shouted at him to please dodge. Ivan mocked him had he stood still because he was afraid to die. But Hugo clenched his fist, unleashing a blow full of anger, surprising those present. The next day, Ivan demanded to know how he had repelled that attack. Hugo denied it, as if he didn't have his relic, summoning his new and improved bow with Puko's blessing, shouting what was wrong with him now. Had he stood still because he was afraid? At that moment, many debris fell on him, wondering what that was, but upon seeing his fear, they asked for calm. He was angry because he messed with his men, but he wouldn't use his relic, since to make it fair, they should fight with their own fists. Ivan didn't believe what he was saying. How dare he treat him like that? And Hugo was already approaching with a punch, feeling that he always boasted about his strength. He had to prove it now. Ivan still underestimated him, but that guy's power was surprising him. Hugo assumes that the strength of an archer should never be underestimated, but they hit him with a headbutt, believing it hurt him, returning the blow. Ivan did the same thing. Hugo recharged his energy, smashing his face, exploding the place, and then breaking his leg. Now it was time for revenge. Upon hearing his complaints, he delivered a knee strike. The subordinates didn't understand what was happening up there, while Ivan only received blow after blow, thinking that if that continued, they would kill him, equipping his body with Taurus's armor. Laughing, he felt he had caught him off guard. But now the second round was about to begin. Hugo dodged. Since he wanted to go all out, he should also draw his bow. At that moment, Hugo hadn't found out how Jin had mistreated his relic. And at that instant, the bow completely shattered. In a kind of sea, Stephen didn't understand why he couldn't move. He remembered nothing after his god's ability, starting to react to a sound, repeating over and over that he could not give up. The people were in danger. After a lapse, he finally came back to life. And in front of him, Jin was cutting off the Calamity's arm, demanding to know what that guy was doing there. Meanwhile, the protagonist just enjoyed the battle, believing he was an imposter. That damned administrator had brought him back. But he already knew how to defeat it. He just had to use that damned attack. The beast tried to catch him, and seeing its speed, it charged its deadly attack. Gio understood. That was the attack he sought, driving his hammer into its jaw since its attack could no longer come out. But it didn't disappear either, and so Jin carbonized the Calamity. It was strong, he admitted it, but his opponent was him. All those present watched as the head of the worst calamity of all was cut off by a single man. Even Stephen admitted that that guy was amazing. Then they gathered on its back. Jin knew he was there. That was another crimson eye, explaining that that thing was just a vessel, since while he was trapped in the tower administrator kept resurrecting monsters. Of course, the crimson eye and the black dragon were included. He fought against monsters that resurrected again and again for 20 years. But Lydra didn't have that ability. She could have even taken advantage of the dragon. But she hadn't been trapped for 20 years, telling the skeleton that it must be disappointing. It just wanted to be killed, but that was not an option. He didn't ask her what they would do now. At that moment, Jin received the notification that Sagittarius's relic had broken. But that was absurd, but he remembered what he had done before, assuming it was normal. But he was busy. He would postpone that for now. Hugo, meanwhile, was just screaming for his life, asking Jin to answer him at once, while the other just mocked him. Hugo just made excuses. Dodging, he kept mocking him for being too slow. Obviously, it was an archer's agility. However, attacks appeared on the ground. He had appeared. Jean-Louis Morin, Taurus, thanked him for that opportunity. However, a sword lurked near his face. Hugo didn't understand what was happening, and Kevin appeared. Upon hearing his words, he felt they never treated him well. That's why he was weak. Hugo shouted at him about what he was talking about, and he was winning, but Kevin felt they should pay more attention to the defense of his sanctuary. Since his sanctuary was infested with flies, Gemini, Capricorn, and Aries, he would take care of them. He should check if his group was safe, but here it is clarified that Kevin wanted to go to the United States. But he got the location wrong, and at that moment Taurus was thawing out. Did they think they could trap him with that attack? Starting to exchange words, Lewis calmed them down, looking down on them as the two weakest. But these words ignited these two, starting to argue again. However, a presence appeared. Libra thought it was good to see them all together. It had been a long time, since the last time. Then they complained because their house had been destroyed again. The dolls shouted to let them go, starting to fight. But something in the sky caught their attention. It was a dragon, and so Libra introduced herself. They asked her why she was there. They hadn't failed yet, but she asked them for silence, opening a magic circle, filling the place, even her allies, with pressure, believing that they hadn't even managed to capture a saint like Sagittarius. They were weak bastards. Instead of asking that question, they should thank her for showing up before they died. Both were punished. As for them, she would play a bit with their bodies, feeling that perhaps she could swap the location of their limbs. She had used Hydra's ability, equivalent exchange. The allies recognized Hydra and asked why they were there. At that instant, a black dragon appeared, and above it was the protagonist. It headed towards the city at full speed. Jin shouted at her that she was trash, jumping towards her. Those present wondered if Libra had been defeated in one blow. None of those present could believe it. Jin asked them why they were up there. They always got into trouble when he wasn't watching them. Kevin demanded answers, but Hugo demanded even more about his weapon and ignoring him. Jin would explain it to them later. These two looked at each other, shouting that this was not over. Taurus used his greatest ability, but was sent flying with a single blow, and Ivan didn't understand why it had gotten dark. And next to him, a dragon had eaten Lois, and Jin gave the black dragon the order to eat that trash too. They were amazed by that thing. Jin explained to them what had happened and how he had brought it back to life with his domestic abilities and many materials, although Hugo thought it was dangerous. Leo remained confident that nothing would happen. In that, Kevin asked them why Libra's scales had not disappeared yet. She herself answered his question. It was simply because she was still alive. Jin assumes it wasn't going to be easy. Summoning his weapons, laughing because now he would really break that ugly face he had. Was she ready to receive a beating? She assumed so. The baby snake had tried to bite first. That's why he should put a leash on it. Jin shouted at the dragon to watch the others. Libra opened a portal in the sky, causing a mega explosion. The dragon managed to save them, while Jin knew it. The trash he had in front of him was not human. Libra laughed. Did she already know? Noting that she could use powers different from the saints. Even if her head was broken, she could regenerate. Shouting that he recognized her, expressing the name of the divine god of Libra, Astrea. She burst out laughing. He was very clever. Now she had nothing to worry about. Jin jumped. He didn't know how a god was on Earth, but it would be interesting if other divine gods knew it. She smiled, charging her power, managing to send the protagonist flying for the first time. Astrea shook her hand. Those hits always slightly hurt her fingers. They didn't understand why Demoness, the Taurus zodiac, was on top of Jaisel's head. She laughed. They shouldn't be so surprised. She still had much more to show, making 6 magic circles appear. They had Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Capricorn, Aquarius, even Aries. Hyun thought it was ridiculous. He assumes that's why he didn't care if the other gods knew. Those damn people had a conspiracy. She felt the anger of the divine gods who lost their saints. It had exploded. They had chosen her as their representative, but she never understood why she hated them so much. But it didn't matter how strong she was anyway. There were limits for humans. The protagonist said she talked too much. What was she getting at? She didn't like him, but she recognized his abilities if he was her subordinate. He would be the king of that world, but if he refused, he simply wouldn't exist. But Jin did refuse. It wasn't even worth listening to her. He always made his own decisions. He didn't care about following others. She assumed he would say something like that. He wasn't that smart after all. Now he was a problem. First, she was going to eliminate that damned city. Aries' ability, Divine God's weapon, Aquarius' ability, Whirlpool, Cancer's ability, Division, thanking Jin, since thanks to him those disasters had appeared, creating a magic circle, enclosing the protagonist, asking him to disappear at once. Libra laughed upon seeing that she stopped him. Since that ability was the power of the gods, it would be difficult for him to destroy it, and she still had many more left. Jin was truly suffering stopping those swords. Libra asked him not to give up. She still had a lot to talk about, starting an incessant attack with the power of the gods. The people present just ran asking for help. Among the crowd, a reporter was reporting on the situation, but a sword went straight towards them, and Kevin appeared, trying to stop it, although not completely, and Hugo saved him, cursing because the protagonist had broken one of those things, and they had trouble with just one. After telling them to get to safety, he assumes that's why Jin didn't want them close. They were weak next to him, but at that moment, a gigantic shadow appeared. It was a tsunami. The people fell into despair. That wave was taller than the buildings. They were simply dead. Kevin had an idea, asking something from his great lady. The protagonist was also incredulous. He didn't know what to do. That wave would kill them all. And upon hearing a small whisper, he smiled. He was a very clever bastard. Libra asked if Jin was already dead, or where the hell he was. Using the constellation's ability, she wondered how many people would die. She was going to destroy them all. But at that moment, the gigantic wave was completely stopped. Libra shouted at her clones that Jin was still alive. They had to go for him. As they approached, they wondered what that was, and the crimson black dragon appeared. Jin told the dragon what he was doing. He should greet those damn people with his breath. Astria cursed him, opening the Gemini portal, redirecting his attack, sending the attack towards the people again. The dragon flew at full speed. Jin shouted at her to stop messing with the people. They had nothing to do with it, managing to break the attack. Astria flew into a rage. It was that damned lunar bitch. Jin expressed that it seemed he wasn't the only one with some support. Now he would personify everyone's anger. She didn't understand him. Anger? That was ridiculous. Did she think there was something bigger and scarier than the wrath of the divine gods? Jin felt it. Did she think people didn't know about her atrocities? His friends, his family, the innocent people, and her damned betrayal. That's why he would receive her wrath, asking if she was the one who had stabbed him in the demon tower, or if it was one of the bastards behind it. She just laughed. That's why he fought so hard to know that truth, but only people who had power could ask questions. That's why he would now ask what 2 divine gods could do against all of them, starting to summon a nuclear attack. Meteorite of destruction. Jin shouted at her if she was sure there were only 2 gods. Receiving the attack. True ability of Sagittarius. Ring of the Sun God. Jin increased his speed, throwing them to the ground. Astra recognized that damn Sagittarius. Hugo and Kevin asked everyone, as celestial lords, that they should pray to Jin. The protagonist shouted at her that he had told her so. There were many people who were angry with her. It wasn't just constellations. Asking the wrath of the 7 divine gods. Even if she had all of them, it wasn't enough to appease humanity's wrath. Asking how many hits that ugly face will withstand, Astra told her to get her hands off. Summoning her clones. Jin laughed. Another presence had appeared. This one shouted at her not to dare touch Jin, and thus destructive attacks appeared in the place at an impressive speed. She didn't understand what was happening, and a scorpion chain appeared. Jin assumes that to defeat the other zodiacs to reach her, he must first deal with Cancer. Astra demanded to know how he knew Cancer's core was there. Jin just laughed, telling her to grit her teeth, starting to pull her, destroying Cancer's core, taking that power away, cursing him. She would definitely kill him, and spirits grabbed Jin's leg. They were kamikaze spirits. Astra didn't stop, combined ability, Aries, and Libra, shouting that someone like him couldn't defeat them. But she was surprised because that ability was Virgo's, even her sword. She had been frozen. Kian was completely ignited, launching himself to attack her, feeling that her greed had no end. He had to step on her hard, so she would stop talking nonsense. But she was even using Gemini's ability, disappearing, managing to counterattack. Then she appeared behind him, starting to appear in different places, hitting the protagonist. That was over. Combined ability of Taurus and Capricorn, impact bombardment. However, Jin activated Sagittarius's ability, managing to see her speed. She couldn't believe it. Even with the buffs from Taurus and Aquarius, he had been able to find her, but he found the flaw. Her body had been poisoned by Scorpio. In the air, she cursed him. Did she think it would end like this? Gathering the magic circles with her Libra, raising the power of the 7 constellations to the maximum. Jin couldn't be left behind, asking his dragon to appear. Warnings appeared throughout the condensed power that was being created. Its mere presence began to tear the place apart. As Jin advanced, the reporter asked them to watch that. The power of the 7 constellations had gathered in the sky of Seoul. They didn't know what the end of that fight would be. But the only thing they knew in that apocalyptic situation was that they should only trust Legion. In it, they demanded to know what Nane was doing. But Stephen himself stopped them, asking all of Leo's disciples to believe in humanity's salvation. They must pray for Jin, everyone must support him. The protagonist received their prayers, every ray of power, every word, every feeling of faith appearing in front of her, receiving Stephen's power and the constellations, shouting that it was his turn to end this battle. Upon receiving his attack, she mocked. That was the defense created directly by a god. It was impenetrable. Jin asked what she was talking about. He also had attacks created by gods, summoning the magic circles. Both shouted their names, and the destructive attacks clashed. Alerts appeared. Taurus's stigma had disappeared. Capricorns, Aquariuses, Aries, Cancers, and Geminis. Jin triumphantly affirmed that he won. She had previously said that the strongest could ask questions, so she couldn't die yet. However, at that moment, a shadowy voice appeared. She couldn't believe he had defeated Libra. Jin demanded to know who the hell he was. He introduced himself by bursting the earth, as the guardian of the great unknown civilization, one of the 13 generals. The man Helmet recounting that 30 years ago, when the unknown civilization appeared, Helmet indicated that this planet was going to be ruled by them. Hyun understood. Was he related to the weak ones from before, and was there to take revenge? He assumes Libra failed her mission. She was supposed to have built the Monarch's Tower, remembering that he, in the past, had defeated her. Because of her, he had to change his plan, believing that reconstruction would be later. For now, he would eliminate him. Jin thought it was luck. He assumes he came at the right time, attacking with the powers of the gods, but his attack was blocked. He clarified to her that facing the power of the constellations, the great power of the monarch was nothing to him. Jin felt his strength being drained. He had experienced that feeling before. He felt the same energy as the dagger that day. And because he was in an unknown dimension, the constellations lost connection. Being in complete darkness, at that moment, he felt a voice that broke his heart, asking what she was doing there. And his body was stabbed, noting that with that ability, his body was now defenseless. That was the Nightmare's ability. She would use any memory to hurt him, asking Libra that it was her turn. Seeing her, he assumes she would use his body to resurrect, asking if she thought that was a good idea. She just mocked him. In the end, she always won. Entering Hyun's body, Helmet assumes it was an annoyance, but he hadn't even resisted. In the end, it wasn't a big deal. But at that moment, we were shown the alert for the ability from the beginning of the manhwa. Super regeneration, which was capable of restoring the damaged body. But there would be a small penalty of 50% for a 1032-hour penalty. And so we were told a little about the protagonist's life. Seeing his doubts, the cheerful one told them that they were great. They were humanity's defenders. If they didn't exist, everyone would have suffered because of those unknown monsters. and since they had already left home, they should go have fun. Then little Hyun was in shock. That afternoon monsters appeared in Seoul. The forces didn't arrive in time. Hyun only cursed, because neither he nor they had done anything. Upstairs, they didn't understand what was wrong with that child. They assumed they should avoid him and go collect their reward, reporting on the news that thanks to them, there were no victims at the location. Little Jin only shouted that he couldn't protect them. Upstairs, Libra watched his memories, understanding why he hated the constellations so much. It was an obvious story. He assumes his past would lead him to death, no matter how strong his anger was. He couldn't overcome divinity. Now he only had to let himself be swallowed by silence, starting to eat him for his resurrection. But an alert appeared. The power difference was too great. She shouted that this couldn't be. It made no sense. Her divinity couldn't be lower than that scum. However, looking up, he couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. Her ability went beyond her cognitive trait. How could such a mutant become a divinity? And another warning appeared. Legion's penalty was breaking. Jin asked her if she knew the consequences of playing with people's memories. Astra demanded to know what the hell he was, and there were 9 seconds left until the penalty deactivated. Shouting at him how the hell he obtained that power, Jin felt that even he didn't know, but his hand held the power to destroy her. Helmet didn't understand what that was. Seeing Libra shot out by Hyun's power, and he no longer had restrictions. All abilities had been completely returned. He had taken the first step as a divine god. Those present didn't understand what was happening. The battle wasn't supposed to be over. What was that black thing in the center of the city? Hugo said that thing was similar to the space Perio had opened, and at that instant, that thing started to break. Helmet couldn't believe the space was destroyed. Hyun felt it was a bit easier than he thought. They were very unpleasant, mocking their monarch. This angered Helmet. He was scum, but his attack was stopped with just one finger. Hyun had a gift for his monarch, stabbing him with the dagger imbued with his monarch's power, telling him his story. He must gratefully accept his gift. Libra didn't understand how the awakened one could face the power of the monarch himself. Even the man Helmet had been defeated. She had to leave that place, but a dagger appeared, asking where she was going. Seeing her insults, Jin smiled. That was the justice the world wanted so much. Gluttony ability. Divinity absorption. That was the destiny she herself had chosen. Astra only screamed for help, and out of desperation, she released Libra's space. She should be crushed by millions of tons. It made no sense to die alone anymore, but she didn't understand why that guy was smiling. And so Libra's space crushed them both. Yu and Kevin asked where Hyun was, and his energy appeared imposing. The reporter said that Libra's palace was starting to change appearance. Little by little, the gluttony ability had directed Libra's ability towards Afyuku's divinity. A new headquarters had opened. Hyun didn't understand why Astra had made such a fuss. It had only been a rather weak attack. That was over for her. Then, from Libra's perspective, we were told how she reached Helmet, convincing him that this time the owner of the serpent would be assassinated. She didn't care that that man had defeated the tower's administrator, showing him that she now had her allied gods on her side. She had even recovered the core of one of the disasters. Compared to her forces, that subject was just a baby snake. Helmet would support her, but she must not let her guard down, believing that the divine gods always sinned with vanity. She accepted it, but it was the same with that thing, which was locked deep inside the demon tower. She felt it but well, for this time she would send the ghosts under her command to support her. Jin assumes those memories filled him with resentment, but he would keep searching. In the memories, his daughter appeared, who greeted him and asked for forgiveness. Her brothers had died, believing she couldn't do anything. Besides, that subject called Legion astonished her. But there was a vixen by his side, Nane. She couldn't stand her. That's why she had decided to go with him. She shouldn't call her anymore. That was her last greeting, asking for forgiveness for everything. Then it showed us when the saints were gathered, believing they were meeting again. Just like 20 years ago, starting to talk about how to get rid of that bastard once and for all. This time Libra was convinced, since now she would have an all-out war, and furthermore they would have the support of the unknown civilization. Everyone agreed. Everyone wanted Legion to die, no matter what. The protagonist understood that they had been conspiring against him for 20 years then. They had used all their tricks to get rid of him. They were bastards. His hatred was getting out of control, but two kept repeating his name. Upon waking up angry, he wondered what had happened. Hugo assumes he fainted when he had won the battle. Hyun understood. He assumes he used all his strength at that moment, but everyone was happy that he was all right. Jin looked at that scene and smiled. Then, upon seeing his surprise, Jin told them it wasn't a joke. He had seen the memories of the Seoul invasion and entered Libera's memories. From now on, they would fight against the monarchs and the divine gods. Seeing their hesitation, he assumes they targeted him, since now he could become the god of the serpent, or the god of deaths. But if power was what angered his enemies so much, he would keep becoming stronger. However, they should listen to him anyway. Now they would fight against a higher class. They must increase their strength and power and become strong together. Then in Hyun's workshop, he had finished all the weapons, and now he had to make good use of his new materials. And looking to the side, he doesn't understand why Helmet didn't destroy the tower, remembering that Libra said someone was locked there. But since he didn't have more information, the only thing he could do was enter the tower directly. Luckily for him, the alert said that he could now choose candidates to temporarily delegate. Then Hugo proudly told them that this was their new accommodation from now on. But it was because his house was destroyed and Jin provided them with this place. His son was crazy because they were going to stay at their uncle's place. Everyone was happy because they were no longer in Sagittarius. But Hugo shouted that they would return when it was rebuilt. But they also wanted comforts, starting to complain, unpacking like crazy to stay in that place. Then Jin arrived asking Hugo to accompany him to see his daughter, because she would become a saint today. Hugo was having the worst day of his life. Wasn't he supposed to only give her a weapon? What do you mean he would make her his saint? His son, his wife, and now Nane, they were all leaving with him. Why the hell didn't he name him a saint too? Jin accepted upon hearing this, and when Hugo complained, it was too late, everyone froze. Jin welcomed Afiyuko, stripping Sagittarius aside, demanding what that was. And someone believed that he had finally arrived. Jin should wait a little longer, but he noticed an opening. Then Hugo was just like a ghost. Now he would become Jin's slave, starting to pillar with Sagittarius. Jin didn't understand why so much fuss, and cursed because something was happening again. A skull had found out that this was the sanctuary of the Serpent Lord. They had to leave. They were the unit under the command of the man Helmet. They came for revenge. Jonal, hearing that, laughed, asking where the rabbit was, because if he took him by the ears, asking him to behave, they were going to figure something out together. Laughing sarcastically, the rabbit just asked him to stop. The army thought it was ridiculous. Only his subordinates were there, but since they were there, they might have some fun. First, he would take care of the zombie face, launching a gigantic attack. The others wondered why Hugo wasn't reacting. Upon seeing that they had hit him, they asked him if he was okay. He should say something, but since he was blessed by Afiyuko, he had become exponentially strong. The army assumes that if he resisted his spear, he must be too strong, believing that their leader was a monster then. And a noise was heard. A person was cutting through the army with two swords in their hands. The only one who could defend himself was the general, demanding what he was doing. She explained that she acted alone, managing to dodge that attack when she saw it. He wondered what Carly Collins was doing there. She thanked him for the introduction, since they knew each other from Leo's arena. She clearly beat him. That girl was the undefeated person of the arena, and she had even beaten Nane. She was recognized as the strongest human in the world. Kevin had heard of her. Scorpion recognized her. But why was Jaycel's daughter there? The general demanded why she was attacking them. Weren't the ones from Libra supposed to be allies? She denied it. She had nothing to do with Libra. She didn't belong to that constellation. She didn't care what happened to the unknown civilization, nor with the other constellations, because she would join Afiyuko. Just then Jin appeared, demanding why so much fuss, unleashing energy throughout the place. That energy destroyed even part of the army. She got excited because he had arrived. Jin mocked, opening the box, presenting Baron Helmet to her. Today he was in a good mood, so for today they could take him and leave the place. Hearing their complaints, Jin told them to mind their own business. The general didn't know what to do. The recent arrival and he were too strong, and with their lord's spirit they could revive him. So for now they would accept his offer. Then Jin asked her if she was there to join. Upon seeing her acceptance, he denied it. He couldn't accept her for now. He thanked her but couldn't trust her yet. Scorpion explained that they already knew she was Jaycel's daughter, not biologically, because Libra wanted her children, but she was still his daughter. Asking the truth of why she was there, she timidly whispered a few words that Jin was her father. But nobody heard that. giving arguments that she wanted to be stronger so she would prove she was worthy. Hyun believed she was a good contender, besides the system told him that her faith was 200% in Asia or Afiyuko, although it caused him a bit of strangeness that she had his genes. For now, accepting her, she had to demonstrate her abilities. She was even happier. Unable while Heasley exploded with nerves, remembering that he thought he heard she was his daughter. But that was not possible. Meanwhile, Kevin asked why he let Baron Helmet go. But he denied it. That head wasn't Helmet, but Capricorn's rabbit, Yangwei. He only complained because Hyun had told him that if he took the fictitious body he made, they could steal information, and he must obey. If he did, he would return his original body. Although he couldn't deny it, he was literally forcing him. He just had to pretend to be that thing. Capricorn cursed. Besides, he asked why they were going to the Demon Tower. They told him that there was something there that could restore his original body and form. Showing us this subject, entering the lowest floor of the tower. There they could restore his condition, making some prayers, extracting the subject's energy, asking the man to absorb that energy. He only got scared upon hearing their words. He told them it wasn't for that, he wasn't scared for his body, but because that thing was starting to move. And the mummy-like creature laughed, demanding that he was not someone of its species, because he wore Baron Helmet's armor. They didn't understand why that thing was moving, explaining that he was one of the monarchs who had been sleeping for a long time, but he had awakened because of the serpent's power. Treating the army like idiots, they must remain silent, freezing time for them for a second. Taking Capricorn, demanding what the hell he was. Upon hearing who he belonged to, he denied it. He couldn't do it, he had a different energy. He must say who was protecting him. He must leave there. Jin from afar assumes they had discovered him, believing he knew he should meet the monarch, but he didn't expect to meet him so soon. He laughed. It seemed he was a newly awakened divine god. Could it be that he was the mutant god? Upon hearing that he also knew who he was, he cursed him, so he knew what state he was in. He had been trapped there starving for a long time. That's why he would swallow his saint's power. He shouted at Jin to do something. He was going to disappear. Jin shouted at him. What was he talking about? He must stop talking nonsense. That subject was not his saint. The monarch cursed. It was a very bad taste. Hearing the repeated demands to save him, he felt his debt was now settled. Clarifying that he had sent him because of an ability he possessed, he would always remember it. And Capricorn began his self-destruction. Jin felt it was beautiful, good thing he knew Capricorn had that ability. He assumes he would visit that place later, and a notification arrived asking what the hell he meant by that. Nanae couldn't believe it. She never thought a situation like this would happen. Stimmy demanded how he dared to abandon his headquarters and join another. Everyone asked their lord to calm down, but Nanae denied it. He wasn't Stephen. Hyun said that the divine god Narasimha had appeared, demanding an opportunity for explanations. Also why Stephen was missing his arms, and why he was in another order. Nanae felt it was difficult to explain, so she had to read the manga from chapter 76 to 86. Narasimha accepted, pulling out his arms, understanding what was happening. He assumes his saint had summoned him to fight that thing, but since the risk was gone, he had to discipline them all by emanating his power. A mission appeared for Nanae to belong to Afyuku. She had to stop Narasimha. She knew it was difficult, but she would do anything to join her uncle Hyun's order. Both exchanged words. Narasimha charged his power, unleashing a huge beam that broke the place. Nanae thought it was dangerous, and a voice told her to drive the spear into the ground. He didn't understand. That damned force belonged to Lee Jian. He was going to knock down that barrier with his bare hands. Thunder claws, but Jian stopped him, calling him leader of the stray cats, asking what he was doing to his saint, hitting him and sending him to the ground. Jian smiled. He was always so reckless. Even if it was a mission, he couldn't fight a divine god. This time he had to intervene for his own good, but Narasimha still didn't give up, shouting to get his feet off his head. Hyun assumes he was strong, asking why he had descended to the world. He explained that it was due to his saint's call, but since he was sleeping, it took him a while to descend. He felt a bit embarrassed for taking so long, but anyway, how dare he belittle him and steal his disciples. Hyun, upon seeing that great power, didn't know why he was making such a fuss, but since it was a race against time, they had to fight. His penalty had been lifted, so he was going to check his new power. Narizima shouted at him that he was an arrogant bastard. He was going to crush him. Hyun with a single hand asked him if that was all he had. His strength was nothing to him now, sending him backward, jumping, asking him to at least give him a good fight. Narizima shouted at him again, not to be arrogant. Celestial Judgment Lotus. Starting to laugh, he still had a long way to go. He simply had to turn to ashes. Hyun told him to keep dreaming, unleashing the power of Afiyuko. Lotus of Disaster. Laughing, he believed that technique of his was very good. That's why he had to share it. But alerts appeared at the location. The powers of the gods were too strong for this world. If they continued at that pace, they could cause a catastrophe. Narizima just mocked, asking him to attack. Was he perhaps afraid? It was clear they couldn't fight anymore. Soon he would go back, but at least he knew it wasn't a big deal. Hyun laughed. He didn't know why he didn't use that from the beginning, pulling out Helmet's weapon, taking Narizima to the unknown dimension. That was another good ability. That's why he had stolen it too, asking how many resources he had now to fight. And alerts appeared that soon all his resources would be depleted, and they demanded where he was looking. Managing to break a fang, but that was nothing for Jin. Attacking again and again, Narizima expelled his power, managing to subdue the unknown dimension by trapping Jin in an electric field. It was his damn end. Jin supposes he looked a lot like Steven when he got excited since he had to look at the alerts. These said that all of Leo's resource points had been consumed. The divine god had to return to the divine realm. Narashima only cursed. That couldn't happen to him right when he was about to win. Jin thought he had only won by being an idiot. Upon hearing his threats, he expressed the same thing to him, and they were doubtful about what had happened. But Jin asked Nanae that since everything had returned to normal, she had to finish her mission. He was completely stunned, wondering what was happening. Nanae explained to him what had happened, and also the entire mission. She had to be able to enter Afiyuko. Steve asked if he seriously thought he could defeat him, and upon seeing that maneuver, he got on guard. But Nanae leaned towards him. She apologized, thanked him for everything. She wanted to be stronger. That's why she had to go with her uncle. She knew he was disappointed. She knew better than anyone what a good, brave, and kind person he was. But this time she had to leave, so she asked him to please accept her change of constellation. Stephen nodded. Hearing his complaints, he asked everyone to calm down. It was a worthy choice. Maybe he stopped his growth, but now he had to leave. He had to be stronger than all of them together. He had to prove his true worth, asking him to greet Jin on his behalf. And upon leaving, Stephen supposes that perhaps that speech had convinced him to stay. But when he turned around, he only received a slap on the head. Completing her mission, asking her uncle that now she could really leave for Korea. End of the second season.